He died a slave, but rose a noble, setting his sights on becoming the strongest in the world. A graceful, pink-haired woman stands beside him, her warm smile hiding a dangerous mystery. With a drawn sword and glowing magic, their new life begins, bound by ambition and a power that defies the ordinary. He steps forward, a blade blazing between his hands as magic flares around him like a sacred vow. The woman beside him smiles, calm and dangerous, knowing exactly how far this ambition will carry them. The promise is set. The former slave will claim the title of the strongest in the world. The road ahead is etched in blood and stone. It begins with the birth of the demon sword and the slave's reincarnation, followed by a flash beneath the moon to reclaim what was lost. Then comes the star-drinking witch and the two slave merchants, paving a brutal path toward a final reckoning. A buzzer screams through the filthy waiting room of the slave fighters' arena. The number 1023 flashes on the board. A pale-haired girl jolts awake, her breath catching as a heavy chain drags from her collar. She forces herself up, hand closing around a sword with brutal simplicity. The arena only needs a body, no matter whose. The call for 123 is cut short when a dark-haired slave fighter steps forward, a sword resting over his shoulder. "I'll go in your stead," Lewis declares. The girl freezes, coughing through panic as she refuses, terrified of the punishment awaiting her. Lewis lowers himself beside her, his gentle hand on her head carrying a crushing weight. He tells her that her beautiful, noble-like hair makes her their symbol of hope. Lewis shoves his sword into her hands, his plea desperate and awkward. He begs her to let him take her place, even clumsily confessing he likes her hair because it predicts the rain. She cries out his name. In return, she admits that watching him practice his swordsmanship for hours on end is the only thing that has ever given her courage. The arena roars his name, hailing him as their only hope. Lewis stands in the ring, raising his blade against a burly, heavily armored fighter. The exact monster the slave trader Alcock intended to throw the sick little girl against. Sweat and fury twist Lewis's face as he curses the bastard who orchestrated this. With a desperate lunge, he cuts through the air, trusting only in his sword. Lewis crashes into the armored brute, but the counterattack is instant and devastating. Blood sprays across the sand. Lewis can only choke out a broken gasp as he is cut down. Behind the bars, a witness watches in absolute horror, the memory of that slaughter forever seared into his mind. The reincarnated slave thrusts his magic sword forward, and a noble swordsman is born in a blinding blaze of light. Beside him, the graceful, pink-haired woman smiles as her own magic blooms into bright, floating orbs. Behind them, chained prisoners stare up in stunned, breathless awe. He drives the shining blade forward, the bursting light, a loud declaration that the old slave is dead and gone. The woman beside him lifts her hands, her magic erupting in dark, glowing sigils that make the chained prisoners reel back. In that brilliant blaze, his new path is forged. As Lewis falls, his final thought echoes in broken pieces from the dark, "If only he had power." The world dissolves into shadow, leaving behind only the bitter, gnawing regret of a man who watched helplessness cost a life. Following that desperate cry, the world cracks open into impossible, blinding sunlight. A small boy lies sprawled in the soft grass beneath bright trees, surrounded by blooming flowers and drifting leaves. The air is peaceful and tender, as if the old slave's death has washed away, leaving him reborn in a quiet, noble garden. He wakes beneath chirping birds and an open sky, breathless and utterly confused. He looks down at his hands and panic hits. They are tiny, childish hands. Before he can scream his old name, a nobleman rushes across the grass, laughing and calling out that he was looking for him. He freezes in shock as the man's sharp, intense grin closes in, his mind spiraling in disbelief. With a sudden swoop, the nobleman scoops the tiny boy into his arms. He grins like he is teasing a child, warning him that the garden is dangerous because of the bees. The boy hangs there in absolute shock, sweat beading on his face, too stunned to do anything but stare. His mind blanks as he stammers out a single, desperate question, "Who is this man?" The nobleman just grins, brushing off the confusion. "Are you still half asleep? It's me, Edward. Did you forget your own older brother?" With that, Edward turns toward home, declaring it is time to go back to their mansion. He stands rigid, staring at the reflection of the impossible child looking back at him. Dark hair, huge, shocked eyes, and a lavish embroidered coat dripping with lace and gold trim. This is no longer the battered body of a slave fighter, it is a child dressed as if he were born in a mansion. He stares at his new body in utter disbelief. There is no dirt, no bruises, no hunger clawing at his stomach, only clean skin, soft clothes, and hair that slips through his fingers, smooth and shining. When he blurts out that it is beautiful, like a noble's hair, the servants react as if he spoke nonsense. Then, a single answer cuts straight through him. "Of course it is, because you are a noble." Dizzy and sweating in his tiny noble body, he mutters in confusion as the past comes crashing back. He was a slave fighter who went to the arena instead of Sharon. Blood flashes through his mind, accompanied by that final, broken gasp, and the impossible conclusion settles over him: he died, and now he has been reincarnated. 13 years have passed since the arena. The boy who died as a slave now stands with a sword in his hand as Lewis Spencer, 16 years old and carrying the same name from his previous life. As the sixth son of the Spencer family, his chance of succeeding his Earl father is practically zero, despite the family's vast influence. Yet, compared to the life he once lived in chains, this noble existence is absurdly easy. Lewis Spencer drives his sword through the grassy air in a sharp, practiced arc. He swings with a sense of space and safety he never possessed as a slave. The thought settles in with the rhythm of his blade. He is finally living an easy life. He steadies himself, wiping sweat from his face with a quiet exhale. Jeremy Spencer, the family's second son, catches him practicing and grins like it is all a joke, mocking his relentless swinging. Lewis turns away, sweaty and tense, barely managing to mutter that it is not about fun. But Jeremy keeps pushing, smug and careless, insisting that a noble who refuses to indulge himself is just being stupid. He grabs Lewis, leaning in with a pasted-on smile, and snaps that a stupid member makes the entire Spencer family look bad. Jeremy's jab dies against Lewis's absolute silence. Lewis just stares ahead, completely unreadable, while Jeremy sweats and mutters that he will never understand what goes on in this guy's head. Still detached, Lewis casually wonders aloud, what is worse, kinky hair or thin hair, leaving Jeremy even more unsettled. Before Jeremy can push further, Edward Spencer steps in, boots rustling through the grass, and delivers a cold, clear verdict: Jeremy stands no chance against Lewis. Jeremy protests furiously, refusing to believe the second son could ever lose to the sixth, and calls Edward's joke mean. Edward, the de facto head of the family, ignores the tantrum. He grabs Lewis by the shoulder, stating he needs to discuss something important with him, leaving Lewis to quietly consider passing on the offer. Edward catches Lewis practicing and smiles, asking if he should recommend him for a knighthood. Lewis shoots back that noble knights need money for women and liquor far more than sword mastery. Edward just laughs and agrees. Spotting Lewis's battered blade, Edward starts pitching a new sword forged from Baron Groover's high-quality iron, but Lewis cuts him off with a quiet, "It's fine, brother." Lewis grips his battered sword, stating that the best blade is simply the one you are used to. Edward answers with a quiet, "I see." Jeremy goes tumbling away down the hill, shrieking about being round, leaving the two brothers in peaceful silence. The quiet moment in the garden is interrupted as a woman's voice calls out, her presence immediately shifting the dynamic between the brothers. As Jeremy tumbles downhill, Edward half-heartedly offers to help, prompting Lewis to call him kind. Edward flushes, flustered, just as his wife Isabella pops up behind him. She wraps her arms around him, giggling as he stammers her name, and teases that he dotes on Lewis so much everyone can see it. Lying back on the grass, Edward can only smile and admit that Lewis is truly amazing. Lewis cuts through the falling leaves, his sword steady in hand, while Edward's heavy faith hangs over him. The older brother believes that if the Spencer family ever falls into true danger, it will be a man like Lewis who saves them. Lewis lowers his eyes, humbled and deeply uneasy, muttering that Edward is giving him far too much credit. Yet, even born as a nobleman, Lewis remains the sixth son, holding virtually no power in the family hierarchy. That harsh truth drags him back to the end of his past life, when he was utterly powerless to save anyone. In his memory, people sprint through the chaos, and his breath breaks around an agonizing confession. He couldn't save a single one of them. Lewis sniffs his glass, savoring the scent while the bartender teases him to take a drink. Lewis refuses, citing the law that forbids him from drinking under 20, earning a scoff from the bartender, who calls him a weirdo for choosing such a rickety tavern. No other nobleman would be caught dead here, but Lewis insists it helps him relax. In his mind, the memories of his previous life still define him, as the tavern was the only pastime slave fighters were ever allowed to have. Rain lashes the cobblestone street as a long-haired girl shouts for the attackers to stop. Two masked men are already on top of another girl, dragging her through the mud. A smiling young man in a bow tie hears the commotion and advises staying out of it, but the dark-haired boy beside him dives out the window anyway, leaving the young man to shout in disbelief. Lewis crashes into the rain-slick street, tearing the attackers off the girl being dragged across the cobblestones. His sheathed sword whacks one man hard enough to stagger him, and he drives a brutal thrust through the chaos. The last attacker eats two devastating blows to the face and drops instantly. The attackers crash down with heavy thuds, and Lewis stands over them, his sword still safely sheathed. The young man in the bow tie can only stammer in awe, while the long-haired girl is utterly stunned that he defeated them all in seconds without even drawing his blade. She clings to him from behind in gratitude, leaving Lewis to clear his throat, awkward and deeply embarrassed. The long-haired girl sinks onto the cobblestones, trembling as the heavy chain of her 1023 collar drags behind her. Her eyes overflow with sheer relief, and through her tears, she manages a broken, heartfelt thank you. Lewis's breath catches as he stares at the girl he just saved. His fingers brush her hair, and a name slips out before he can stop it. Sharon? She stiffens in confusion, kneeling in the street as whipping leaves surround them, and asks the question that hits him like a blade. How does he know her name? At the tavern, the rescued prisoners cram bread into their mouths, munching as if the food might vanish at any second. At another table, Sharon sips her drink, the 1023 collar still clamped around her neck, trying to make sense of how this nobleman knows her. Guessing he must have visited the arena, she presses him, and Lewis sweats through the lie, admitting it was kind of true. Lewis asks Sharon how old she is, and the answer hits him like a physical blow: 25. The memory of her as a little girl beside his own 24-year-old face drives the harsh reality home. She has lived years past the age he ever reached. Still wearing the heavy collar, Sharon thanks him for his help, and a shaken Lewis explains that the young boy's mother is sick. Sharon admits she led the escape to give the boy one last chance to see his sick mother, gathering everyone and running for their lives. Lewis is stunned. This is the same Sharon who used to be a crybaby. He blurts out that she is just a girl, asking why she would risk herself on such a dangerous undertaking. Sharon lowers her eyes and reveals the truth. Long ago, a slave fighter became their hope, and before he died, he told her she was everybody's hope, forcing her to lead them out. Sharon smiles with an aching brightness, the chain still hanging from her neck, vowing to become the ray of hope for everyone in his stead. Lewis can only stare, deeply shaken by the memory of the slave fighter who had saved her. Trying to lighten the heavy moment, Sharon sips her drink and asks for his name. When he answers, "Lewis!" she freezes in absolute shock. Lewis asks what is wrong, and Sharon admits she was just startled because he shares the exact same name as the slave fighter she remembers. Lewis reassures her, noting that her beautiful hair is nothing like that man's wild, kinky hair. A wave of nostalgia drifts through him, a quiet realization that the day he has been waiting for has finally arrived. The tavern turns poisonous the instant the slave merchants walk through the door. One grins with predatory delight, while the other sneers at the gathered rescued prisoners. Sharon flinches, the old terror snapping back into her eyes. Lewis freezes in dark recognition, the memory of tiny Sharon in chains beside these exact men crashing over him. The man who bought them steps forward with a grin, introducing himself as Alcock. When Lewis gives his full name, Alcock's attention snaps to the smooth, noble hair and the immense weight behind the Spencer family name. Sharon demands to know their business, and Alcock suddenly bows with oily politeness, feigning ignorance of the noble's identity. Then the mask drops. The escaped slaves are his property, and he has come to take them back. The word stabs through Lewis like a blade. Lewis draws his sword, placing himself between Alcock and the escaped slaves, his voice hard as he refuses to give them back. Alcock lets out a strained hum, his smile twitching as the word property hangs heavy in the tavern. Lewis turns the trap around. If Alcock insists they are property, then Lewis will simply buy them. Sharon can barely believe it, but Lewis is dead serious, ready to spend his noble savings to secure their freedom. Alcock refuses flat out. He leans into the law like a blade of his own, declaring that the owner has the absolute right to decide what happens to his possessions. Lewis's offer to buy them runs straight into Alcock's oldest trick. He names a king's ransom, finds fault, and raises the sum even higher. No matter how many times someone tries, they can never buy his slaves. Lewis presses him one last time, asking if there is truly no way he will sell them. Alcock's smile twists into something sinister as he replies that, well, if Lewis insists, there might be a way. Suddenly, Sharon grabs the sword from Lewis, freezing as the cold steel rests between them. Her eyes go wide, sweat beading on her cheeks, and a broken gasp slips from her lips, as if the blade has dragged a buried memory straight back into the light. Alcock's grin widens as he asks if anything is wrong, making his cruelty plain. The escaped slaves are still his property, and he decides how they are used. Sharon, sweating and shaken, bows her head and answers, "Very well, my lord." Lewis's jaw clenches, his silent command echoing in the room, "Crush the opponent." Alcock's cruelty instantly turns the tavern into a brutal brawl. A masked swordsman lunges with his blade, two fighters crash together in a flurry of violence, and one of them snarls a furious curse at Alcock's name. As the brawl tears through the room, Edward notices that Lewis is far more volatile than usual. A panicked voice begs Lord Edward to stop them, insisting that as the next head of the Spencers, he must be able to do something. Edward cuts the plea off cold. It is frustrating, but Alcock is right, and even aristocrats cannot violate property rights. Alcock grins, savoring the legal trap he has set. Edward tries to stop Lewis, baffled that he is siding with the slaves, and orders him to give up. Lewis doesn't blink, stepping firmly in the way and declaring that Edward cannot get through. The word law lands hard, and Lewis repeats it like a curse. As Alcock snickers and the escaped slaves watch in terror, Lewis tightens his grip on his sword with a sharp clack. Accepting the trap, he has no choice but to fight. Lewis steps between the collared slaves and the trap, delivering a ruthless, noble loophole like a drawn blade. In that case, I'll adopt all of them as my children. The words strike like a physical blow. The slaves behind him freeze in stunned silence, while Alcock's smug certainty shatters, his eyes widening in pure shock. Lewis turns to his brother Edward, demanding to know if imperial law truly backs this loophole. Edward huffs, then lets a sharp smirk slip through. To preserve noble bloodlines, aristocratic adoption overrides every other right, but only a higher-ranked noble can deny it. Lewis's entire gambit now balances on a razor's edge. Alcock's face twists in horror as the impossible reality sinks in. An aristocrat adopting slaves. Edward lets out a sharp, mocking laugh. "Funny, isn't it? And you're right. Lewis isn't a typical nobleman." Lewis turns his back without a second glance. The merchant spit curses at his retreating figure. "Damn it! You better remember this!" The heavy door slams shut. Among the stunned slaves, Sharon covers her mouth, cold sweat running down her face. The realization begins to dawn. Hold on. Does that mean... The truth hits like a burst of sunlight. Sharon throws her fists into the air, trembling as she cries out, "We're free!" The others behind her erupt into stunned, disbelieving joy. She whirls toward Lewis, her hair snapping with the sudden motion, and pours every ounce of her gratitude into one breathless cry. "Lord Lewis! Thank you so much!" Lewis can only stare, caught completely off guard by the sheer, overwhelming storm of relief crashing toward him. Sharon drops her head so hard the floor thumps. Lewis tells her not to mention it. He did what he wanted, and she should raise her head. But then his eyes lock onto a familiar blade lying in the dust. The sword marked NE-023. The very sword he left behind that day. He snatches it up and bolts, a single burning question tearing through his mind. Did Sharon keep it this whole time? Lewis reaches toward a blinding flash beneath the moon, and a number burns into the light. He's for 39. His face twists in sheer disbelief, sweat forming on his brow as the shock hits. What? Lewis stands in the blast as the flash tears open into a vision of 4 swords. Each one radiates enough pressure to make the air itself feel sharp. A black, fanged blade appears first, followed by a straight sword, a dragon-headed blade, and a curved demon sword. They hang before him like ancient, inescapable verdicts. The wind whips his cloak as the vision presses closer, the sheer weight of those blades feeling like a door swinging open onto a path he can never walk away from. The pressure of those 4 hanging swords is so heavy, the air feels razor-sharp. A bearded man snaps, "What?" admitting that even he can feel the overwhelming, suffocating power. Lewis and Sharon stare, utterly stunned. Then, Lewis raises his own sword high, and a single cut tears through the dark with a violent whoosh. Lewis's strike erupts over the city in a blinding cross of force, tearing effortlessly across rooftops and towers. The shockwave screams outward, swallowing streets and shattering stone beneath pure, unadulterated pressure and light. A woman with a heavy chain locked around her neck smashes through a wooden wall with a primal roar. Splinters fly as a man and a boy nearby reel from the impact. The shock hits so hard a stunned thought breaks loose. This. Before another voice can finish the terrifying realization, this power is... The dark-cloaked man sinks into the rubble, utterly stunned, as the woman with the chain around her neck rises in a blazing, luminous aura, her sword held high. "Incredible!" she breathes. The long-haired girl and the boy nearby are frozen in pure, breathless awe. The promise is carved in iron. A former slave, reborn as the strongest noble, sets out with the older girl beside him. Together, they aim for the absolute strongest in the world. The path forward is clear. The former slave, reborn as the strongest noble, marches onward with the older girl at his side, determined to reach the world's absolute peak. Lewis wonders what special abilities the 4 swords possess. He clicks the red gem on one of the hilts. The blade instantly answers with a violent burst of flame, and a single, casual slash melts the cake sitting right in front of him. The blue gem answers with a blast of frost. Lewis quickly realizes the red gem is a flame sword, and the blue is an ice sword, both painfully obvious from their reactions. Then, he holds up the black one, genuinely curious about what it could possibly do. Lewis grips the black sword and immediately feels his body go weightless. He whirls through the air, briefly wondering if his physical abilities have skyrocketed. But the sword's shadowy power coils tightly around his arm and violently hurls him straight through a window. A cat watches in silence as he crashes onto the ground outside with a heavy thud. Lewis remains sprawled outside, growling as he wonders if some delayed backlash is about to drain him dry. He shifts his attention to the final sword, a beautiful shining blade, and tests it with a casual swing. The cut flashes cleanly through the dish in front of him, but no strange power answers. Lewis blinks, entirely baffled, and mutters that absolutely nothing happened. An hour later, he is still hacking away in the yard. The maids hush each other, panicking over whether Lord Lewis has finally lost his mind. Frustrated by a weapon he cannot understand, Lewis decides he will have to ask his brother to fit a new blade into the... Sharon bursts into the room, clutching a towel to her drenched, panicked form. The heavy slave collar is still locked tight around her neck as she cries out for Lord Lewis to help. Lewis freezes, cold sweat breaking out on his face, barely able to believe it is actually Sharon. She trembles and stammers through the sheer shock. She had no idea what to make of a proper bath after a lifetime of washing in freezing rivers. Sharon's bath panic erupts into absolute chaos as the maids swarm her in a cloud of foam. She screams that a bath is a place where everybody touches freely. Lewis tries to calm her down, admitting he was confused at first too, explaining how servants wash his hair to make it smooth. Sharon snaps back, That isn't what a bath is. That is just aristocrats." The servants refuse to back off, charging after Sharon and promising to scrub her clean while she yells for them to stop and stay away. Lewis finally gives in, declaring he will tell the servants she doesn't. Sharon whirls in her new dress, the iron collar still clamped firmly around her neck, sparkling with delight as she gasps that it is an actual dress. Lewis can't help but think that, for all her years, she remains painfully childlike. But the celebration dies instantly when the maids apologize, admitting they couldn't remove the collar. Lewis answers quietly that he already knows. Discipline collars are made by owners to train slaves, the most efficient, brutal way to control a human being. Alcock's messenger drops off a box of collar-controlled devices, and Lewis and Sharon instantly freeze. "Alcock? Why would he send these?" The messenger sneers, claiming Alcock has no guts to openly oppose the Spencers. Suddenly, the devices come flying into the room. A furious, bandaged man lunges forward and grabs Lewis, snarling, "You'll be our owner." Lewis can only stare back, stunned and completely confused. Sharon moves before anyone can even process Lewis being their owner. Her sword flashes in a blinding arc, slicing through the collar-controlled devices Alcock sent. They shatter midair, blasting the furious men back in pure shock. One of them stares in utter disbelief, asking if she really just broke them. Another, still shaking, can only stammer, asking if they weren't supposed to be used as property. Lewis is just about to move forward when Sharon's feet slip on the wet floor. She crashes down with a heavy, sickening thud. His calm instantly shatters into raw panic as he shouts her name, and the maids outside the castle scream, "Miss Sharon!" in sheer alarm. Sharon lies helpless on the bed, while servants and attendants crowd around her in a state of emergency. Then, the answer drops like a death sentence: mana poisoning. Lewis freezes, cold sweat pricking his face as the horrific words sink in. "Mana poisoning," he echoes, panic tightening like a vice around his chest. The doctor tries to explain mana poisoning with a crude comparison. If someone starved for a week or suddenly fed rich meat, their body would violently revolt. He quickly apologizes to Lord Lewis for the low-born example, but Lewis cuts him off, already understanding the mechanics. You start with rice gruel, then slowly return to meat. But then the real, lethal danger lands. The collar blocks a person's mana flow. If it is broken suddenly, all the built-up mana surges out at once like a bursting dam. Sharon's body is that dam, and the collar was the only thing. Someone desperately insists, but we're fine." The doctor's warning is merciless. The longer a collar stays on, the worse the backlash. The truth spills out in agonizing fragments. The men were sold into slavery 3 years ago. But Sharon has worn hers since childhood, more than 20 years. "That's way too long," the doctor says, looking down at the helpless girl. "Her body won't be able to deal with all that mana." The men go completely still in horror. Lewis can only stare in heavy silence before forcing out the only question that matters. "What should we do?" The doctor offers Lewis the only sliver of hope remaining. There is exactly one way to save Miss Sharon. They must find the star-sucking witch beyond the western forest and have her drain Sharon's overflowing mana before it completely destroys her. The doctor's warning lands hard. The star-sucking witch is notoriously ill-tempered, and there is absolutely no guarantee she will grant their request. Lewis doesn't hesitate for a single second. He bolts. A servant panics and chases after him, shouting that he can't possibly go by himself. He can send someone else. Lewis fires back that this is a critical matter, and when asking for help, going personally is just common courtesy. He turns and storms out of the manor, leaving Sharon lying helpless in bed, barely able to draw breath. Her weak voice catches on his name. "Mr. Lou? Is?" Lewis leans over Sharon's bed, trying to sound reassuring. "Just wait here," he promises. "He will bring a doctor soon." Sharon's breath catches, her eyes wide as she asks if he is truly leaving. He starts to promise he will be back. Then she screams, "No!" She lunges forward, clutching him desperately and begging him not to leave her. Lewis freezes, utterly stunned, calling her name as the rest of the plea rips out of her throat. She doesn't want to be alone again. The raw terror in her voice cuts straight through his confidence, and for a second, all he can do is stare. Sharon clings to Lewis, absolutely terrified of being left behind. A servant panics, shouting that Miss Sharon is sick, but Lewis only holds her tighter. "All right, we're going to heal you," he declares. "Next stop is the mountain where the star-sucking witch lives." He pauses, suddenly realizing a critical flaw in his plan, and asks where that place actually is. Someone immediately snaps back. "Where were you planning to go?" before he scoops her up and carries her out, the door. They finally reach the mountain of the star-sucking witch, where the land itself feels deeply cursed. Black pools of stagnant water, broken stone, and twisting dead roots surround them, while strange stars drift through the air like something alive. Beneath a leafless tree, a hunched shape moves in the dark, as if the entire mountain has been waiting for their arrival. Lewis clicks his tongue, noting that Camus stayed home. The thick, rolling smoke makes one of the children panic, while another nervously asks if the witch is actually here. One of the group explains the smoke comes from meteorites that fell on this mountain, warning everyone to stay away because it is highly poisonous. When asked if meteorites always fall in numbers like this, the answer is a firm no, which must be exactly why she is called the star-sucking witch. Lewis mutters, "Anyway," as the others help carry Sharon. She is much heavier than she looks, and they press onward through the toxic haze. Sharon clings tightly to Lewis, and he just laughs it off, saying it is perfectly fine since she refuses to let go. One of the children watches him, utterly stunned by how radically different he is from any other aristocrat. The thought keeps twisting in their mind. Why isn't he arrogant? Why doesn't he just send servants to do the grueling work? And why on earth did he adopt them as his own children? A massive white tiger appears in the mountain trees, and the children instantly freeze. One screams in pure terror, while another bizarrely deadpans that it looks quite fluffy. Up close, the beast bares its razor-sharp teeth and lets out a guttural growl before roaring and lunging straight at them. Lewis doesn't hesitate, cutting the beast down mid-leap while Sharon clings desperately to his back. Lewis's brutal slash hurls the tiger away in a heavy splash, sending it crashing into the dark water while Sharon stays glued to his back. The children stare in shock until one blurts out, "Is it over?" and the other grins, shouting, "Nice!" But Lewis does not relax. He keeps his eyes locked tightly on the ripples spreading across the water, knowing deep down the fight is far from over. A massive, heavy paw plants itself on the rocky ground. The tiger rises again, transforming into a towering, muscular beast man, its shaggy body looming menacingly under the moonlight. Lewis, Sharon, and the children freeze in absolute horror. One gasps, "The tiger turned into a beast man," while another can only whisper in disbelief, "Shaggy!" The beast man crashes down with a brutal, earth-shattering bash. Lewis snaps, "Is this also the witch's doing?" The impact tears a massive crater into the rocky ground, sending sharp stones skittering everywhere. A star-shaped shield gets knocked loose in the chaos, and Lewis barks, "Get down, idiot!" before violently dragging the children beneath its protection. One of them shudders and curses under his breath as the heavy shield absorbs the devastating hit. The beast-man looms over the shield, its massive claws hooking tightly onto the edge. A child screams, "Trip up 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 up." Lewis and the blonde man brace themselves as the monster roars and slams its full, terrifying weight against the barrier. Sharon and the others huddle tightly behind them, completely trapped in the beast-man's crushing shadow. Lewis shouts for the blonde man to take care of Sharon, then throws himself directly into the beast-man's charge. Steel rings violently against claw. Clang, 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 as Lewis desperately parries the monster's brutal, relentless blows. From behind the star-shaped shield, one of the children can only mutter, "He's fast," but the beast-man breaks through the guard and hammers Lewis squarely in the body. Lewis chokes, "Guh!" blood flecking his face as the devastating hit drives every ounce of breath from his lungs. Lewis meets the beast-man's next charge, head-on, and tears through its defense with a savage, blinding slash. When the violent clash finally ends, he drops to one knee, his breath ragged and blood streaking down his cheek. He grips his sword with white knuckles, looking like he can barely keep himself standing. The children can only stare in stunned, heavy silence, barely managing to choke out, "Why?" Lewis snaps back through the blood and pain that they should have run away, that this is exactly what they get for trying to protect useless, skinny slaves like them. But they do not flee. From the ruined ground they ask the question that cuts far deeper. "Why aren't you abandoning us?" Lewis hunches over his sword, his chest heaving, and answers with two exhausted, definitive words. It's simple. Parents protect their children at any cost. Lewis, bloodied, battered, and shaking, turns that raw truth into an unbreakable promise. "I won't abandon you ever again." The children's fragile hope cracks the instant more tiger beastmen close in from the darkness. One can only whisper a trembling, "Ugh!" while another quietly repeats, "Ever again!" The huddle freezes under the monster's crushing shadow, Sharon trapped tightly between Lewis and the blonde man as the beasts loom on every side. Lewis's hand tightens around his sword, and the answer tears out from inside him, raw and desperate. "I need power." He knows it has to be overwhelming power, the kind that can shatter through claws, numbers, and fear all at once. With the tiger beasts closing in for the kill, Lewis's desperate cry for power is answered by a memory that should not exist. Don't you already have that power? Numbered embers flicker ominously around a shadowed swordsman, and the question sinks into Lewis's mind like a physical blade. He drives forward, his cape snapping in the wind, his eyes locked dead ahead. His face hardens, and his hand clamps tightly around the hilt, as if the overwhelming power he needs has been in his grip all along. Lewis refuses the answer before it can even attempt to comfort him. "No, I need more." The numbered charm marked 132 burns fiercely in his hand as the mysterious voices press him further. "Then wish for it. Tell us your wish." His fingers lock around the charm, shaking violently. "My wish." Then Lewis screams the absolute truth out of his soul, sweat and terror tearing loose with every single word. "I want to protect them." Lewis's desperate wish to protect them erupts in a glittering, blinding burst, just as the beastman's massive paw crashes down on him. The blow stops dead against a sudden, shimmering shield. The blonde man can only sputter in confusion, "Huh?" Lewis looks down, utterly stunned. "The beastman definitely hit me, but it doesn't hurt?" Lewis understands the sword's terrible price in the exact instant the beastman's blow lands. It raises his companion's defense to absolute levels, but part of the damage transfers straight into his own body. He chokes out a pained, "Ugh," as the children cry out, "Mr. Lewis!" But the agonizing pain does not stop him. With one final monumental surge of strength, Lewis drives straight through the tiger beasts and cuts them all down in a blinding, decisive slash. Lewis's blade tears the night wide open beneath the full moon, a single, star-bright slash cutting cleanly across the entire hill. The tiger beast men are already scattered below him, broken and defeated in the dirt, their eyes rolling back as the sheer, overwhelming force of Lewis's strike leaves them completely helpless. "He protected us," the blond man says, his voice still shaking, "and he risked his life for us." Sharon scrambles to Lewis's side, trembling so hard her words break apart into panicked fragments. "Are you okay? Any injuries? Can you walk?" He can only answer her with heavy silence. Then he turns the question back to her. "What do you think?" Sharon stays quiet for a long moment. Then she answers, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "He's not like the liars we knew." She gives a firm, resolute nod. The blond boy grins wide and thanks Lewis, calling him Dad. Lewis freezes, completely stunned and flushed, as the children around him suddenly flare into a brilliant, blinding light. He stammers, utterly bewildered. What's going on?" A blinding light erupts, revealing a shining, long-haired boy and a short-haired girl standing behind Lewis. A bright, triumphant "Ta-da!" rings out. "Have your spirits grown stronger?" someone asks. Lewis stares, sweat-streaked and terrified, watching the people he just saved change right in front of his eyes. His gaze drops to the weapon in his hand, and the chilling realization bites deep. Is that also this sword's power? A sword and a broken chain brand, his fate. A reincarnated former slave rises to become the strongest noble, aiming for the world's peak with his older daughter at his side. The sword answers before Lewis can even understand it. A blade marked 100 and glows and levitates into the air, shining as if it has chosen its own moment. Lewis reaches for it, but the power surges too violently. With a deafening whoom, "Thoom!" the sword tears free, sending him crashing to the dirt. The children scream as Lewis hits the ground hard. One of them, still shaking, forces out the question everyone is thinking, Lewis, what is that sword?" Lewis can only groan. Lewis struggles to explain the impossible scabbard in his hands. It belonged to the sword he used in his previous life as a slave, and 4 swords appeared the moment he picked it up. His brother gives him an easy out, telling him he doesn't have to answer if it's too hard. But Lewis is still stunned by the sheer understanding. The brother simply notes that years of hard training have finally borne fruit. Lewis thinks that is exactly the kind of answer he would expect from him. Then the brother asks if Lewis plans to take these children home. Lewis says yes. He admits that taking them in as his children is the exact condition under which he acquired the swords. The kids freeze behind him. Lewis decides the rescued children need a real home, not just temporary shelter, and asks his brother to build another house on their land. His brother agrees at once, brushing aside a protest that Jeremy already lives in the main house. Lewis thanks him for everything, but the brother immediately starts needling him. "Lewis's children!" He muses, amused that he has suddenly gained nephews and a niece. Lewis pushes the teasing aside and turns to the kids, asking for their names. One barely manages a quiet "Lim," before the others step forward as Gavin, Leo, and Camus. Lewis flings his coat behind him, grinning as he calls out, "Sharon, Leo, Gavin, Camus, all right, let's go!" The children answer with a bright, unified yes and run after him. They are still marked by chains and fear, but they are pulled forward by pure hope. The impossible truth settles over them. An aristocrat has just become their father. Who would believe such a fairy tale? Lewis sits in a quiet room of the Spencer family main mansion, still staring at the scabbard from the sword he used in his previous life as a slave. He mutters a quiet, Old slave fighter instincts haven't left him. Even now, he inspects everything closely, a reflex from his past. Back then, he would scrutinize even a meal for stray hair, and he could read an opponent's next move from the flow of their hair. After Lewis tears through the attackers with a sword of light, the party pushes on toward the witch's forest to save Sharon, walking straight into a beastman ambush. But the aftermath delivers the real shock. Leo and Gavin have somehow powered up. Their scrawny bodies are now shiny, macho, and absurdly buff. One of the kids catches Lewis staring. "What's wrong, Dad?" The boys finally notice what changed. Whoa, I'm kinda buff. Leo and Gavin stare at themselves, stunned, wondering if this new strength is really theirs. A whoosh of power still ripples around Leo and Gavin. They thank Lewis for the gift and promise to use it for him. Then one of them brags that his super strength is the more useful of the two powers, while Sharon twitches with a skeptical, "Oh?" The transformed boys are already throwing punches and bragging about whose new power is better. One boasting his super speed is more useful, the other threatening to pluck him like a chicken. Lewis cuts the chaos short, telling them their new bodies came with new attitudes and that they need to hurry to the witch. The boys are wounded too, but when they offer to carry Sharon, Lewis refuses to hand her over. He carries her himself. Sharon is spent, huffing in Lewis's arms as the group pushes through the woods. A rustle in the trees snaps them alert, and a beastman lunges at Lewis with a sword. The boys scream, "Watch out, Dad!" Lewis parries the blow, but another beastman appears out of nowhere, and the kids freeze in shock. A stitched teddy bear sparkles with hearts and stars, instantly disarming Lewis and Sharon with its sheer cuteness. "See you ought!" they gasp. One of the boys points out that it is already covered in cuts, but Lewis still can't bring himself to slash it. Sharon just shrugs. Well, it doesn't matter. One of the boys charges in with his sword, shouting, "How dare you attack our dad!" The stitched bear is hacked apart in a storm of cuts, and a brutal finishing blow tears it to pieces. A whoosh of motion flashes across the stitched bear as Lewis and one of the boys shred it in a savage burst of cuts. Sharon watches from behind while the other boy stammers, "S, strong, wow." One boy yells, "No fair," accusing the other of stealing his finishing blow after Lewis said the bear was too cute to slash. The other snaps back, "Anything you can do, I can do too," while Lewis mutters, "You're just a sore loser." Sharon cuts in. "Wait a moment." The bear suit waddles through the trees with a rustle, alive despite its wounds. Cotton spills out, and one of the boys panics. "What's going on? Is there nobody inside the suit?" The boy's question lands with a chill, "It's empty." The drinking witch watches from the moonlit branches. Thin lines crisscross the dark as the bear suit is revealed to be nothing but a hollow shell. The bear suit rockets through the air, and its torn seams snap shut as fresh stitches crawl over the fabric. Sharon catches the horror first. The threads are sewing it back together. It crashes into Lewis with a brutal bee-lamb. He barely holds the blow, shocked that it somehow got stronger. Sharon stares into the attack and demands, "Who are you?" "Are you really asking that?" The drinking witch snaps back, her starry eyes narrowing under the brim of her hat. Thin threads glint around her as she taunts the intruders for barging into someone's house with their shoes on and then asking the owner's name. Her smile turns razor-sharp. "Are you that dumb?" Lewis clocks the bear doll floating overhead and realizes magic is pulling its strings. He names her as the Star-Sucking Witch. She smiles and asks if that is what people in the lower world call her. One of the boys snarls at her, but Sharon cuts him off, reminding him why they came. Lewis suddenly bows, apologizes for entering her territory without permission, and introduces himself as Lewis Spencer, while the boys warn him he is about to get chewed out. The name Spencer hits the witch like a trap snapping shut. Her eyes sharpen. A son of Spencer? For Sharon's sake, Lewis forces himself to stay polite, even though he already knows this witch is ancient, short-tempered, and dangerous. He asks her name. The witch twirls through the air with a bright, unsettling smile and answers, "Alice Cythera." The boys flatter Alice as Miss Alice with beautiful curly hair and explain that their friend is ill. Only Alice can save her. Alice cuts straight to the danger, mana poisoning, and whether they took Sharon from her owner by force. Lewis admits they were tricked, then begs, "Please save Sharon, I beg you." Alice leans in and asks if he really wants to help her. He answers yes. Alice grins and twists the knife. If Lewis wants Sharon saved, he has to get on his knees and beg. The boys snap, furious that she would talk to their dad like that. But Lewis cuts them off. He knows humiliation is the price of help. He drops so fast the floor slams under him, head bowed, and begs for her aid. Alice Cythera goes still at the sight of Lewis on his knees. The boys are already sobbing over their father's smooth kneeling motion, praising how dedicated he is to Miss Sharon. Alice floats above him and asks why a noble would kneel without hesitation. Lewis keeps his forehead pressed to the floor and says he has no reason to hesitate when it helps someone important to him. Then he drops the truth he is used to kneeling from his previous life. Alice only answers with a quiet, Alice says she has never met a noble like Lewis, then gives him the one opening he needs. If his answer convinces her, she will save Sharon. Her question cuts straight to the contradiction. Why would a nobleman want to save a slave woman? Lewis nearly cracks at the chance. Really? But then he steadies himself and declares he will speak. His reason starts dragging him back into the past. I was. Lewis drops the truth like a confession. He was a slave in his previous life. He knows Alice won't believe the whole story, so he keeps the past life part buried, even though some part of him still can't quite accept it himself. The memory drags him back to the slave pit, where chained bodies and hooded watchers close in. He fought every day to entertain the rich, with Sharon at his side as one of the few friends he had before he died. And still, he remembers. Lewis's memory tightens around two chained hands, squeezing for dear life. He remembers the slaves huddled together, surviving only by supporting each other. Why he helped them wasn't logical. It was because they were family, bonded by their lives. So, when men came chasing the slaves, Lewis moved before he could even think. Lewis closes the memory with the only answer he has. He moved before he could think. And that is all there is to it. Alice tests him with a sharp, "Really?" Lewis sweats, stammering that he isn't lying. Then Alice lays bare exactly why she doubts him. For a noble to want to help slaves is strange. Lewis sits there, spaced out, while the bear doll toddles over with a bottle and the plushies wobble around him. His voice shakes as he asks if it is really strange that he wants to save Sharon. Alice huffs, "Yes, strange," and lays it bare. They live in a hierarchical society. Alice perches on the bear doll and drops the ugliest question yet. For the upper class, isn't it natural to use slaves? Lewis trembles, his eyes blown wide, as the words hit him like a physical slap. The memory drags Lewis back into the slave pit, where the enslaved are shaking and gasping, and his face freezes in disbelief. "What is that?" Alice cuts in calmly. "You mean this? Why are you surprised?" Then her eyes pin his, and she turns his own past into the question that stings the hardest. Isn't this a typical treatment for slaves? Alice leans into Lewis's humiliation and admits the worst part of herself. She loves that broken look because she loves watching people suffer. She mocks his heart as ugly beneath his beautiful curly hair, making the bargain brutally clear: if he keeps talking back, she won't help Sharon. Lewis can't stop himself from muttering, "Bitch." Alice instantly snaps, slamming him down hard enough to wreck the chair beneath him. He ends up gasping on the floor while Alice just sighs and shrugs it off. She has tons of spares. Lewis's fist slams into Alice, blasting her across the room with a brutal thump. She crashes down hard, then glares up through the pain as a magic circle flares behind her. Even though it's an illusion, punching me is unforgivable. Alice vanishes with a vicious warning. She will let Lewis out only when it is already too late for Sharon. Lewis snaps into confusion, realizing he is not in the mountains anymore. He is trapped in an illusion. The whole slave pit warps around him, and even the Sharon. He reaches for bends apart. He understands now that the place, the slaves, and Sharon herself are all magic. Alice's scream tears through the illusion, while Lewis's expression turns ice cold. He mutters, "Nasty bitch," then drags in a breath as darkness crawls over him. His voice drops into something final. "I won't forgive you." A blinding flash erupts around his silhouette, swallowing the fake slave pit in blinding white light. The white flash leaves Lewis facing the demon's sword, the other blades hanging behind it like silent witnesses. It cuts in with a hiss. "Why did you turn to that witch for help?" Lewis jerks, caught off guard. "What?" The demon sword's voice comes from the blades as one. "Tell us. Your wish." Lewis goes still, then asks the only question he can. "What should I do?" Lewis answers the demon's sword with a vow that sounds like a curse. Darkness, to the darkness. He tears through the forest in a savage slash, blasting leaves and branches apart. He reappears in the starlit woods while the boys pant and shout, "Dad, where have you been?" And Sharon, "Where is Sharon?" The boys' relief dies fast when they realize Sharon is still there. But Alice sneers that making it out of the illusion doesn't matter because the girl still won't recover. Lewis answers with a calm, "It's okay," and the darkness around him erupts, sweeping forward with a brutal whoom. The force tears through the space between them, leaving the boys stunned. They recognize it with dread. This is the same power that protected them before. The darkness that had wrapped around Sharon's body starts tearing away from her. It doesn't vanish. It gets sucked straight into Lewis, dragging from Sharon into their dad's body while the boys realize what is happening in absolute horror. Sharon blinks awake, the fog finally clearing from her eyes. Lewis clenches his hand and releases the last of the black magic from her, then checks her carefully. "I guess you're okay, Sharon." Sharon answers with a bright, relieved, "Yes." Strength rushes back into her like she is shining again. The boys can barely contain their joy. "Thank you so much, Mr. Lewis. I'm glad Miss Sharon is okay." With Sharon safe, Lewis turns them back. "All right, let's go back." One of the kids immediately panics. "Why it?" But the danger around Sharon has finally broken. Alice's control cracks as she screams, "Don't you need my magic? And why? What did you do?" Lewis cuts her off cold. "No, we don't need it anymore." He finally understands the Sword of Darkness. Its power is absorption. That is why his strength surged when he cut the cup in the mansion. He had been draining power from someone nearby. Now he can aim that force with precision and pull Sharon's mana straight out of her. Alice goes white with disbelief, teeth clenched, eyes wet. "No way. Impossible. I'm not needed?" Lewis answers Alice's collapse with the one thing she doesn't expect. "No, Alice. It was thanks to you." Alice freezes, sweating, barely able to whisper, "What?" He tells her that when she forced him to speak about his past and when she showed him that stupid illusion, she didn't break him. She reminded him what he actually wants. Sharon, Leo, Gavin. Their faces settle into his mind, and Lewis finds the dream he is going to chase. Lewis's wish finally takes shape, and it is bigger than revenge. There are still slaves living in wretched conditions, and he wants to save every one of them. With Sharon, Leo, and Gavin burning in his mind, he turns that dream into a request. Will the demon sword help him? Their smiles land like proof that this future is worth fighting for. Under the moon, the answer comes back bright and united. "Yes, Dad." The town glitters beside the sea, while a dark, star-flecked shape looms offshore. After everything, Lewis's family has finally found a goal worth chasing. A former slave, reborn as the strongest noble, sets his sights on becoming the world's strongest, with his older daughter at his side. A former slave, reborn as the strongest noble, sets his sights on becoming the world's strongest, with his older daughter at his side. Lewis turns the whole forest into forward motion. "All right, Sharon's been cured, and we have a goal to aim for." Leo's relief spills out with him. "Let's head back to our home." The group moves through the trees together, while Alice trails behind with her broom, small and silent under the dark branches. The kids finally ask what they are supposed to do about Alice, but Lewis cuts it down instantly. "Leave her be. He doesn't even look back. We don't need to concern ourselves with her anymore." That hits Alice harder than any attack. Her smile twists into something rotten as she realizes they are just walking away. Did they just ignore me? Then she starts laughing under her breath, surrounded by snarling forest beasts with bared fangs. Her hatred curdles into a promise. She loves watching people suffer, and she swears she will make them recognize her. Louis, Sharon, Leo, and Gavin ride through a petal-strewn street in a carriage. The calm is almost deceptive after the forest as the chapter title lands, Chapter 4, 2 Slave Traders. Blood hits the ground as Louis's chained feet drag forward, one broken step after another. His collar, 732, bites into his neck, and he clutches it while gasping that he wants something, anything. Then a thin ray of light cuts through the dark. Not much. Just a glimmer of hope, the kind he reaches for whenever hope is all he has left. Louis staggers under the weight of the chains, collar 732 biting into his throat, blood streaking his body as he drags himself toward even the smallest light. The sight drags him back to the person he hates remembering most, his own filthy, broken slave self, untidy, wretched, and barely holding on. Louis bolts upright, horrified that his hair has sprung back like it's alive. He clutches at it, panicking over my hair, then exhales when he realizes it's still smooth. That relief dies fast. A woman in a hat perches on a chained slave like a chair, calmly saying it's only natural for the upper class to use them. When the chair breaks, she just shrugs that she has tons of spares, while the other slaves look sick. One nearly retches, and Louis can only grit his teeth and think, no, it's no good. Louis looks out over the city with a grim truth hanging in the air. There are still many slaves in this world. He tears down the hallway, only to stop dead at a flower-trimmed nameplate reading, Louis Family Sharon. The shock leaves him frozen, staring out the window as the weight of his new reality settles in. Inside, Sharon is sprawled face down across a bed stuffed with heart pillows, fast asleep. Louis peeks in from the doorway and mutters a quiet, sorry for disturbing her. The next door bears the nameplate, Louis Family, Leo Gavin Camus, and inside, the three are tangled together in bed, groaning in their sleep. Louis watches them and lets out a small, relieved chuckle. Louis's face tightens with purpose as he races down the hall. "Edward, brother, I want to talk to you. May I come in?" he calls out. The ornate door creaks open, revealing Edward at his desk in a vast, sunlit library. Edward is buried in books, casually lecturing that knowledge is power. It protects your family and sharpens the mind. But Louis drops the pleasantries and admits the real reason he's here: I need your intellect. That hits Edward like lightning. He practically rattles with excitement, thrilled that Louis is finally relying on him, and beams, "Ask me anything." Louis lays it all out. What happened in the forest, the illusion Alice showed him, and the iron resolve hardening inside him to save more slaves. Edward's face hardens. He shuts his book, calls Louis by name, and fires back with a question that makes the whole dream feel terrifyingly huge. Does Louis really think he can eradicate slavery across the entire world? Louis freezes, the word slamming into him like a physical blow. Eradicate slavery. Across the whole world? Edward doesn't soften the blow. Indeed, it's impossible. You can't eradicate slavery. He explains the ugly truth. The system survives because the world demands cheap manpower. At most, Louis could free every slave in a single country. Louis pushes back, desperate for a foothold. In one country? Is it possible? Theoretically, Edward answers, pointing to the shining city beyond the window. Create a prosperous country, and there probably won't be slaves. But Edward crushes that fragile hope. If one country stops using slaves, the demand won't vanish. It will just pull them in from somewhere else. Louis clenches his fists, but Edward just gives a bitter little "he" and calls it human nature. Then Edward surprises him. Since Louis almost never asks for help, Edward actually wants in. He already has ideas, but he refuses to hand over an easy solution. Instead, he tells Louis to come back only after he answers one brutal question first. Edward's question cuts through Louis's head like a blade. How does he actually want to save them? Louis throws himself down, rolling around in sheer frustration. He claws at the thought, furious with himself. After all, he was a slave in his previous life. He knows better than anyone how they feel. But that's exactly what makes the silence so brutal. He still doesn't know what to do. Lewis's mind claws at one question. What could have made him feel saved in those desperate days? A memory cuts in. Young Lewis bursts through the bedroom door yelling, "Dad!" He freezes when he spots Gavin in bed, then turns to his father, sweating hard, and stammers, "Dad, is it okay? For real?" While Gavin just stares back in utter confusion. Lewis nearly explodes when his father brings in a mountain of booze, but the second his father casually mentions slave moonshine made from half-fermented grain, the grin drops. Lewis demands to know how he knows that. His father tries to dodge with, "I heard rumors," before shoving the spotlight onto Gavin and asking if he likes alcohol that much. The drinking witch answers with a quiet yes. She's been dreaming about it since childhood. Back then, daydreaming was her only pleasure. She fantasized about opening a liquor store once she was free, where she could drink her own merchandise as much as she wanted. Young Lewis immediately ruins the fantasy. "No, no, no, you can't just drink your merchandise." The dream crashes hard. She drops to the floor, stunned, whispering that the store would go bankrupt, and young Lewis awkwardly tries to patch things up. "Oh, don't feel down. Besides, it's just a fantasy." Young Lewis suddenly tells the drinking witch she can use the merchandise as she pleases, then snatches a bottle from Gavin and bolts. Gavin just stares, stunned. The hallway erupts. One girl yells, "No fair! Why did Dad thank you?" While another boy runs off to tell Edward. Young Lewis storms into the study, a shining bottle in hand. His brother barely has time to ask, "It didn't take you long, Lewis? Have you made up your mind?" Before Lewis answers, breathless, "Yes, brother, I've decided." The last word hangs there. "I'm," as the room holds its breath. Young Lewis stands in the study with his arms folded, papers whipping around him, and drops the answer his brother was waiting for. He's going to become a slave trader. The suits behind him freeze in shock. His brother's eyes narrow behind his glasses, and the only reply he gives is a quiet, loaded, "Oh." Edward demands the explanation, and young Lewis drops the loophole. Instead of fighting slave traders to free their slaves, he can peacefully buy them. When Edward presses, "What will you do after that? Sell the slaves?" Young Lewis shakes his head. A memory of the drinking witch's words cuts in. "If I have a store, I can drink my merchandise as much as I want, right?" And young Lewis turns it into a brutal rule. It's up to the trader to decide what they do with their merchandise. Edward bursts out laughing. "I see," he admits. Lewis's idea is far more interesting than his own and agrees to sponsor him. Lewis thanks his brother, though Edward finds it odd that he would accept the help. Lewis just shrugs it off. Ideas alone won't trade. Edward promises to back him no matter what, then asks, "By the way, Lewis, as a nobleman, why are you so obsessed with slaves?" Lewis just stares. Lewis answers Edward with a quiet, loaded line. "I'm just taking up the baton from someone I knew long ago. Nothing more, nothing less." The memory that follows is brutal. A blood-soaked man, barely alive, thinks, "How miserable," as his strength drains. His hand slips from the sword. "I can't fight anymore," and he knows this is it. A little girl with a slave collar clings to the blood-soaked man, rustling against him as if she can pull him back. She shakes him hard, and his mouth twists into a bloody laugh. His eye trembles under the blood. Then she beams, shouting, "Yeah!" I discovered the face of explosive laughter. The young drinking witch shakes Mr. Lewis hard, blood and tears streaking his face. She freezes, then breaks down herself, asking, Why are you crying, Mr. Lewis?" She had once patted him and shouted, "The face of explosive laughter should have made you laugh. Why?" But all she got was his pained groan. Lewis brushes it off. "It's nothing. Just a story so old it could have happened in a previous life." The bearded man notices the weirdness. Lewis sounds like an old man, even though he's barely 17. Then asks where he plans to get slaves once he becomes a trader. Lewis answers with cold, practical calm, "In this city," then spread the operation to neighboring territories once the business gets going. The bearded man freezes, eyes wide, and can only spit out, "What?" The bearded man stops Lewis cold. "Wait, Lewis. You're kidding, right? Louis doesn't blink. I'm serious. The bearded man asks if he remembers what he told him, and Louis says, of course. Louis throws the man's own words back at him. You said, decide what you want to do on your own, didn't you? The bearded man stammers, well, moreover, you also said, before Louis cuts in with, I'll help you, no matter what. His eyes glint as he says it. The bearded man laughs, counts on him, brother, and Louis heads off with a, have a good day, already thinking the man is scheming like a true merchant. Louis barely gets the door shut before Alice's footsteps catch him. He turns, and she's right there in the hall, flustered and apologetic. Mr. Louis, sorry for ambushing you. I got a bit worried because you were missing. Louis just gives a faint, amused huff, letting her confession hang heavy in the air. The tiny hope Sharon once received from Louis has grown into something huge. She smiles through her nerves, hand on her head, realizing she wants to pass that hope on to other slaves too. It's okay, she tells herself. I made up my mind. Then Louis looks at her, steady and serious, and says, Sharon, I've decided. Louis declares that he'll become the savior of every slave in this world. The vow turns massive behind him. Capes spread, 4 burning swords circling him like a promise carved directly into the sky. Night wind whips around Alcock Trading. Inside the ornate office, a shadowy figure sits behind the desk, breathing hard, while bound hands and a black beast with glowing eyes huff in the dark. The man in the leopard print hat is trussed up, gagged, and kneeling over a stack of gold bars, huffing like he can barely breathe. Behind him, a smug portrait of a wine-drinking man watches the humiliation like it's a private joke. Alice hurls the leopard hat man's hat aside, then drives a brutal kick into him and snarls, "Stop drooling, pig!" She keeps him pinned there, muttering, "I bet that Louis is going on with his life and not even thinking about me. How vexing." But the irritation fades fast. She smiles, a dangerous edge creeping in. Well, it's okay, because that won't be the case for much longer. Alice curls her fingers like a puppeteer, smiling with dangerous affection. She promises to mess with Louis so much that he'll never, ever forget her. A former slave, reborn as a noble, sets his sights on becoming the strongest in the world. Louis throws his hand up, fired up. Sharon's cured, and now they finally have a goal to aim for. The rest of the group answers with relief, calling for them to head back to their home. But behind them in the dark woods, the young drinking witch watches the group vanish as a sharp whoosh cuts through the trees. The kids ask what they're supposed to do about the strange witch girl they just left behind. Louis shuts it down immediately. Leave her be. The others agree, bluntly deciding she isn't their problem anymore. But the young drinking witch doesn't fade into the woods. Surrounded by roaring forest beasts, she realizes they ignored her completely. The shock curdles into a sick little laugh. She mutters that she loves seeing people suffer, then glares with pure venom and swears she'll make them recognize her. The city beyond the window carries the grim reminder there are still many slaves in this world. Sharon comes racing down the hall, and Louis is already there with a flowered nameplate reading, Louis Family Sharon. A declaration that she isn't just safe now, she's family. The shock of it lands hard. Louis, blood-soaked and chained, drags himself across the floor, the ball at his ankle scraping out every last bit of strength. Collar 732 bites into his neck as he grips it and gasps, "I want." He staggers toward a ray of light, a glimmer of hope, and the sight breaks into a helpless "no." Louis lies bloodied and chained, collar 732 biting into his neck as his wrecked body drags him back to the lowest version of himself. In that broken state, he remembers it clearly. His own untidy, wretched self. Louis jolts awake, horrified, and claws at his hair. "My hair! My hair!" He checks it, panicking for half a breath, then exhales in relief. Thank God it's smooth. But the relief doesn't last. His face darkens. "No," he mutters, gritting his teeth. "It's no good." The memory crashes back. Alice lounging over slaves like they're furniture, casually asking if it isn't only natural for the upper class to use them. When one slave collapses beneath her chair, she just sighs that the chair is done for, then brushes it off, saying she has tons of spares. The city beyond the window carries the bitter reminder, there are still many slaves in this world. Alice comes racing down the hall, and Lewis is already there with a flowered nameplate for Sharon. Lewis, family Sharon. It's a declaration that he's building a family, and the shock of it hits hard. Lewis slips in with a quiet whoosh and a sheepish sorry as Sharon sprawls across the bed, soft and careless. The door sign reads, Lewis family, Leo Gavin Camus, and inside, the three groan under the heap while Lewis just smirks at the beautiful chaos. Lewis's face hardens as he races down the corridor, footsteps echoing toward Edward's room. At the ornate door, he calls out, Edward, brother, I want to talk to you. May I come in? The door creaks open into a vast, sunlit library, where Edward sits alone at his desk beneath towering shelves as petals drift through the light. Lewis steps into Edward's library and finds him buried in books like always. Edward coughs, then lectures him with a straight face. Knowledge is power, it protects your family, and it enriches the mind. Then Lewis gives the real reason he came. To be honest, I need your intellect. That one line wrecks Edward's seriousness. His eyes blaze behind his glasses, he rattles with excitement, and he practically begs Lewis to ask him anything. So Lewis tells him everything, what happened in the forest, the illusion Alice showed him, and his iron resolve to save more slaves. Lewis lays his mission bare to Edward. He came for advice because he wants to save as many slaves as possible. Edward closes the door, calls his name, and throws the impossible question back at him. Does Lewis really think he can eradicate slavery across the whole world? Lewis freezes, sweating, as the true, terrifying scale of his dream slams into him. Edward hits Lewis with the answer he already fears. It's impossible! He tells him flat out that slavery can't be eradicated because the world runs on cheap manpower and the endless demand for it. At best, Lewis could free every slave in one country. When Lewis asks if that's even possible, Edward says, "Theoretically!" Then Edward's whole mood flips, bright and almost giddy, as he lays out the real path, build a prosperous country, and slavery will probably disappear on its own, leaving Lewis stunned by the sheer size of the dream. Edward cuts through Lewis's hope with the ugliest part of the plan. If Lewis frees slaves in one country, the demand won't vanish. The buyers will just import them from somewhere else. Lewis looks sick, but Edward just calls it human nature. Then Edward surprises him. Since Lewis almost never asks for help, Edward actually wants in. He already has ideas, but instead of handing Lewis an easy answer, he forces him to stop, think, and answer the question first. Edward's question lands like a blade. How do you want to save slaves? Lewis sprawls in the library, trapped on one word, how. He rolls over and over in frustration, trying to force a plan out of his head. The only answer he can grab is the one carved into him. He was a slave in his previous life, and he knows better than anyone how they feel. But knowing the pain isn't the same as knowing how to end it. Lewis is still clawing at the question of what could have saved him in those desperate days when a rustle cuts through the room. Gavin bursts in shouting, "Dad!" and the kids on the bed freeze. One gasps, "Gavin!" while another can only stare in confusion. Breathless and sweating, Gavin stammers, Dad!" then asks, "Is it okay? For real?" Lewis drops the kind of line that should have stayed buried. Slaves usually survived on moonshine made from half-fermented grain. The second it leaves his mouth, Gavin knows his father is hiding something. It starts with the maids hauling in a ridiculous mountain of booze. Gavin yells, "Booze!" and Lewis tells him to drink as much as he likes. Gavin laughs that good booze is a miracle, but the joke turns dangerous when Lewis says he bet Gavin would like it. Gavin snaps, "How do you know about that, Dad?" Lewis flinches, mutters, "I heard rumors," and tries to pivot back to alcohol, asking if Gavin likes it that much. The drinking witch says yes, she's dreamed about it since childhood. Back then, daydreaming was her only pleasure, and owning a liquor store was the whole fantasy. If she had the store, she could drink her own merchandise whenever she wanted. Young Lewis instantly bursts the bubble. No, no, no. You can't just drink your merchandise. He can already picture the store going bankrupt, and when she droops, he awkwardly softens it with, don't feel down. Besides, it's just a fantasy. Young Lewis twists the girl's dream into a loophole. Use your merchandise, as you please. The silence after that lands like a bad idea already forming. Then Lewis suddenly rockets forward and snatches a bottle from Gavin. "Thank you, Gavin," he shouts, leaving the boy completely baffled. Lewis sprints down the hall with the bottle while the others lose it behind him. One kid shouts, "Hey! Why did Dad thank you? No fair!" Gavin can only stare after him, admitting he has no idea why that happened, while another yells that Lewis is running and someone goes to tell Edward. Lewis rushes into the study in a glittering burst, breathless but certain. His brother, seated behind the desk, doesn't look surprised. "It didn't take you long, Lewis. Have you made up your mind?" Lewis answers from the doorway, firm and shaking with the weight of it. "Yes, brother, I've decided." Then, huffing, he starts the declaration that changes everything. "I'm," and the words hang there before he can finish. "I'm," and the words hang there before he can finish. Lewis stands amid the flying papers, arms crossed and grinning, and announces, "I'm going to become a slave trader." The suited crowd behind him freezes, and his brother's glasses catch the light as he can only manage a stunned, "Oh?" Instead of fighting the slave traders, Lewis is going to buy them all. His brother demands the ugly follow-up, "What will you do after that? Sell them." But Lewis shakes his head. A childhood memory clicks into place. If a store owner dictates the fate of their merchandise, then a trader decides everything. The trap snaps shut. It's entirely up to the trader. His brother throws his head back and laughs. "I see! Your idea is more interesting than mine. All right, since it's decided, I'll sponsor you." Lewis bows his head. "Thank you very much, brother." The brother smiles, amused. "How unusual of you to accept my help." "Exactly. Rest at ease. I'll help you no matter what," Lewis replies. The brother leans back. "Well, you can't trade with ideas alone." But then the amusement drops. "By the way, Lewis, as a nobleman, why are you so obsessed with slaves?" The room falls dead silent. Lewis just stares, his expression turning cold and unreadable. He gives a quiet confession. He's only taking up the baton from someone he knew long ago, nothing more, nothing less. The memory drags him back to a blood-soaked, curly-haired man barely holding on, his face wrecked, choking out how miserable it all is. The man knows. This is the end. His hand reaches for his sword, but the strength is gone. He admits he can't fight anymore. Then a rustle cuts through the silence. Sharp, sudden. A little girl clings to the blood-soaked man, trembling as she shakes him hard, while blood runs down his face. His eye snaps open. She bursts into a wild, desperate grin. "Yeah, I discovered the face of explosive laughter." But the laugh she expects never comes. His face crumples instead. Tears spill as he pats her head, throwing her into a panic. "Ooh, why are you crying, Mr. Lewis?" Her face of explosive laughter was supposed to save him. Instead, it only makes her scream and flail, having no idea why it failed so terribly. Back in the present, Lewis dodges the deeper reason with a faint laugh. It's nothing, just a story so old it might as well have happened in a previous life. His brother notices that Lewis sometimes talks like an old man, despite being only 17. Then the question turns practical and dangerous. Where does Lewis plan to get slaves once he becomes a trader? Lewis answers with terrifying calm, in this city first. Once the business gets going, he'll spread his operations into neighboring cities. The answer hits his brother like a physical slap. He freezes, glasses halfway off his face, eyes wide. His brother is still stunned by the slave trader plan and blurts, "Wait, Lewis, you're kidding, right?" Lewis doesn't blink. "I'm serious." He reminds his brother of the very advice he gave him. "Decide what you want to do on your own." Then he turns the promise right back on him. I'll help you, no matter what." The brother sputters, then half laughs that Lewis is already scheming like a true merchant and says he's counting on him. Even so, the doubt still hangs there. "Hey, are you really serious?" Lewis shuts the door behind him with a creak. Drinking Witch's voice catches him in the corridor. She's flustered and apologetic, admitting she ambushed him because she was worried he'd gone missing. Lewis only gives a quiet, "Amused, eh?" Sharon remembers the tiny ray of hope Lewis gave her on that day. Now, it feels huge. She pats her head, thinking back to how small that hope once was. "It's big now, though," she admits. Then she steels herself. "It's okay. I made up my mind. I want to give this big hope to other slaves as well." Lewis looks at her. "Sharon, I've decided." He makes a vow that fills the sky. He will become the savior of every slave in this world. The world looms behind him as 4 blazing swords ignite around his body, turning his decision into an oath bigger than himself. The night wind tears through the streets outside Alcock Trading. Inside the office, a hooded figure hunches at the desk, breathing hard while a black mass crawls across the floor. Bound wrists hint at another captive, and something with sharp eyes watches from the dark. The hooded figure is revealed as a merchant, bound tight and gagged, kneeling on a platform with gold bars stacked in front of him. He pants hard through a metal muzzle, trapped and sweating, while the smug portrait of a wide-hatted man hangs behind him like a cruel witness. Around his feet, the black mass keeps creeping closer. Drinking Witch snaps, "Stop drooling, pig!" The merchant flinches as the whack lands hard. Then she sinks into a bitter murmur. "I bet that Lewis is going on with his life and not even thinking about me. How vexing!" Her smile sharpens into something poisonous. "Well, it's okay, because that won't be the case for much longer." She smiles like she's already savoring the revenge, sweet and poisonous at once. She promises to mess with Lewis so badly that he'll never forget her. The promise is clear, Lewis. The reincarnated former slave who has risen into the strongest noble is aiming for the world's strongest with his older daughter. Sharon takes the front with her sword in hand, backed by Lewis, Leo, Drinking Witch, and the others. Every blade is drawn for the climb ahead. The charge is unmistakable. Sharon takes the lead with her sword, while Leo, Drinking Witch, and the others brace behind her, all united under the banner of the strongest noble. The road ahead is set. Family's first battle, Camu's awakening, Sharon's feelings, "I won't let it be too late, and I want to be together forever." The next stretch is all about family bonds, awakening, and the terrifying fear of losing each other before it's too late. The day after Lewis announces he'll become a slave trader, a jealous boy outside the study seethes that Lewis is alone with Edward again. Inside, Lewis faces his brother and asks why he was called. Edward smiles too warmly. He confirms the slave trader plan, then calls Lewis, cute as always, "My little brother." The sweetness feels like a trap. Edward has called him in for a request that hits like a snare, crack down on bandits. Lewis can feel it. The family's first campaign has already begun. Lewis studies the plain paper and immediately asks if it's different from a wanted list. Edward explains, "Wanted lists are for big fish bandits, while a crackdown order is for a swarm of small fry." This isn't a hunt for one notorious criminal, but a sweep against lesser threats. Then Edward twists the knife with a smile, bringing up Lewis's jokes about becoming the trader who would save every slave in the world. Lewis answers without hesitation. He's serious. Edward laughs it off as youthful ambition, but his teasing turns oddly affectionate. Apparently, there are no old men as cute as Lewis. Edward squeezes Lewis in a too friendly hug, trying to make the crackdown sound harmless. "Anyway, everyone has to start somewhere." Lewis coughs under the grip, but the request clearly hits a familiar nerve. Edward lays out the bait. The gang has 20 members. The reward is only 20 gold coins, and they're just small fry. But it's still a start. Then he makes the real condition clear. If Lewis proves he can crack down on the gang without outside help, Edward will be able to support him with pride. Lewis doesn't let him finish asking. "I'll do it!" Edward smiles, slides the crackdown order across the desk, and sees Edward hands him a shining feather pendant, the wing of Arhat, a charm that instantly transports its bearer to safety. Lewis nearly chokes when he realizes it costs 100 gold coins. 5 times the reward for wiping out the bandit gang. Edward brushes it off as a parting gift, but the question that lands is colder. Do you understand why I'm giving you this item? Lewis grips the charm in silence. He holds the feather charm and understands the price. This is Edward's last kindness. From now on, Lewis has to do everything alone. Edward grins like a brother who's too sweet to be trusted, calling him so cute and wishing him good luck as Lewis walks away. But Lewis's thoughts cut straight back to the life he lost. No freedom, no power, no food. And in the end, no life at all. His old vow cuts through him. This time, he swears he'll gain the power to change the world. He grips his sword, straps it in, and the promise hardens into action. He steps forward for the bandit crackdown and tells everyone that if they defeat the gang, they'll finally be officially recognized as a family. With the mission ahead, Lewis steadies himself. Let's do our best. Sunlight bursts over the town as the Lewis family rides into its first battle. The whole street opens ahead of them like a road to destiny. The maiden battle of the Lewis family has begun. The mission kicks off with a sugar rush. The kids are ecstatic over candy, shouting that they want to hit every shop in town. Lewis cuts them down with a dry, "You're all pumped up for the wrong reasons," then checks himself, realizing he sounds too much like a scolding adult. But Gavin takes it way too seriously. He kneels with a knife, offering to cut off his own finger as an apology. Lewis thinks Gavin's sense of duty is almost a liability, while Leo's smile turns sharp enough to make the whole thing feel dangerous. Camus watches the adults, thinking they have it hard, always guarding their pride. Then, suddenly, he flips into Sharon is so spaced out that 2 guys behind her start gawking and calling her a hottie. One wonders if they should call out to her, but the other shuts him down. She has a boyfriend. Lewis notices the boy nearby and mutters that he's definitely her little brother. Then Sharon suddenly snaps back. She grabs Lewis's hand and calls out, "Mr. Lewis." She admits there's something she really wants, promising she'll work hard to pay him back. Sharon drags Lewis to the big bargain sword sale and practically sparkles, squealing that she finally said it. The shopkeepers freeze in shock, and Lewis nearly snorts. He brushes off the onlookers as Sharon asks the owner the price. He bursts out laughing like she just asked for jewelry instead of a blade. Apparently, a woman wanting a sword is the funniest thing he's heard all day. Sharon proudly whips out the flower-decorated wand like a treasure, squealing, "Yay!" and gushing, "Thank you so much, Mr. Lewis." Lewis just smiles, thinking she's childish as always. Then the spell breaks. The others are off making noise in the shops, completely distracted. Lewis snaps back to reality and shouts, "Ah! Did you forget about our mission?" One of them weakly tries to call the group back, but the day is already settling toward evening. The mission is still waiting. At the bandits' hideout, a skull and blades flag snaps in the wind above a rough little settlement. A cauldron swings over the fire, surrounded by laughter. The bandits are already drunk, roaring over skewers and cups like they have absolutely nothing to fear. The bandits laugh inside a hideout that's way too big for a small gang. Lewis realizes it used to be a village, and the bandits probably slaughtered the villagers and took it over. Sharon snaps first, lunging in and swearing she'll crush them. The others shout to go first, and Lewis tries to stop the rush, insisting they need to gauge the enemy's strength before charging. Sharon and Leo snap at the bandits, demanding to know what they said about them. But their bravado wobbles the second the bandits notice the kids are harmed. One of them grabs Sharon's sleeve and sniffs that she must be a noble because her clothes are expensive. Lewis sighs that this is exactly what happens when someone gets loud. The hideout crew barks, "Who the hell are you?" And the reckless charge suddenly feels a lot less clever. A bandit cackles that Lewis would fetch a hefty ransom. More than they made killing and selling the villagers, Lewis just goes still. Sharon steps in front of him with her sword drawn, quietly asking him to let her take the lead. The bandits spot her and realize she's the strange beauty they saw in the city. They start ogling her, one muttering, "She's good," while Sharon stays perfectly calm. She turns to the kids and says she's counting on them. They cheer. Then the hideout erupts into a stampede as the bandits bark that anyone who comes to pick a fight has no right to complain about the consequences. Sharon and a second girl carve through the bandits, blades flashing as the men scramble to keep up. One of them snarls, "Be bitch," before Sharon cuts him down. She says she's indebted to Lewis for buying her the sword, for saving them when they were slaves. Her sentence trails into "and" as the next strike lands. Sharon's resolve sharpens into a promise. She'll work hard to repay Lewis. Then she turns that promise into violence, driving her sword through the bandits in one brutal slash. Bodies are hurled back, blood bursts. The men around her are cut down before they can even recover. The bandits are already panicking. The frail girl cutting through them is terrifyingly strong, and one of them can only choke, "Shh, she's strong." Lewis knows why. Sharon survived 20 years as a slave fighter. That new sword finally fits her. Sharon thanks Lewis, thrilled by how easy it is to use, and Lewis realizes the old sword was holding her back. This one lets her unleash her full strength. The kids storm into the hideout, yelling that they won't lose to Miss Sharon. Lewis swings at a bandit with a furious, "This is for Dad!" while Sharon cuts through the rest, coolly asking if they're asleep and calling them slow. Leo lands a hit of his own, but the fight leaves him gasping, furious that if he were an adult, he could do more. Lewis is so impressed by Sharon and the kids tearing through the bandits that he blurts, "They're good." But one bandit takes the opening. He creeps up behind Lewis, raising his weapon while sneering that only cowards attack from behind. Since he's a bandit, he doesn't care. He hisses, "Die," and swings, while Lewis stays crouched and completely unaware. The masked bandit drives his weapon down at him, snarling, "Bastard!" Lewis stays crouched, completely unaware as the strike falls. Lewis drops low and slides clear of the overhead swing. The blade screams through the space where he just was. Cloth shreds around him as the attack cuts empty air, leaving the brute overextended. And Lewis is already moving to answer. Lewis moves so fast, the masked bandit can't even finish asking why he's already past him before a clean slash drops him. The kids are stunned, shouting, "That's our Mr. Lewis! And when did you cut him?" as they realize they didn't even see the hit land. Afterward, the group tallies the bodies outside the hideout. 8, 5, 10, 5, 1. Until Lewis adds his own and realizes the whole gang is gone. Sharon's blade crashes into Lewis's sword with a clang. The impact rattles him so hard he starts to tremble. Her follow-up whips through the air and he barely keeps his footing, stumbling back across the snow. The wind screams through the snow as a lone figure stands there, already feeling like trouble. The boys sneer that even if the other side just gained a new member, no matter how many small fries they pile up, they still can't touch their dad. Then the eye-patch man's gaze locks onto the smooth-haired man, and the smooth-haired man goes dead silent. Master Noble hums over tea, while Drinking Witch watches him with a knowing smile. She sips her cup and says she knew it, then needles him for really doting on Lewis. He squeaks, insisting he only showed Lewis the crackdown order, and flashes back to a rooftop where he insists he didn't help directly. She agrees, but she heard the rumor anyway. Troops were sent to crush every gang around here except the one Lewis is after. He spits his tea while she smiles, and he's caught red-handed. Lord Edward tries to play innocent over tea, but the woman at the table reads him instantly. She tells him he isn't looking her in the eyes, then smiles as she explains that the bandits are so busy with their own messes they can't help each other. He awkwardly insists the crackdown is a good thing and pretends he doesn't know who gave the order. Then an armored attendant bursts in, yelling, "Lord Edward!" and blurts that they cracked down on a gang he ordered. Lord Edward panics, snapping at him to stop yelling and not say that. But the attendant drops the bomb. They found something. Lord Edward freezes as the woman keeps smiling, like she knew this was coming all along. Lord Edward freezes over a document, and the woman beside him notices the shift in his face. "Dear?" she asks, but he barely answers. The words hit him hard. "Oh no." His eye goes wide, sweat dripping as his hand shakes the paper. Why did this man join this gang? Now, of all times, the wanted poster slams the truth into the room. The masked, white-haired man is worth 100 gold coins, and the real threat looms right beside it. Lewis studies the face in silence. Lord Edward sweats over the paper, realizing this isn't some petty gang recruit. The bounty on his head alone is enough to make the nobleman panic. The day after Lewis announces he'll become a slave trader, someone outside Edward's study grumbles that Lewis is alone with him again. Lewis steps in and asks why Edward called him. Edward smiles. "Lewis, you're planning to become a slave trader, right? You're cute as always, my little brother." Then he slides a paper across the desk. "So, why don't you try this?" A request to crack down on bandits lands in Lewis's hands. Edward and the woman watch from the desk as Lewis reads the order in absolute silence. Lewis wrinkles his nose at the plain paper, questioning if it's just another wanted poster. Edward explains that wanted lists are for big fish bandits. When there are no big fish to chase, the authorities just issue a crackdown order. Lewis catches on instantly, a smirk forming as the paper flutters. This is only for small fry. Edward then brings up Lewis's wild dream of becoming the trader who would save every slave in the world. Lewis insists he is dead serious. Edward plays the wise elder, claiming he doesn't hate youngsters with big dreams and admits he's old deep down. Lewis fires right back. Edward reminds Lewis that everyone has to start somewhere. He lays out the first job, a 20-man gang, a 20 gold coin reward. Small fries, but a real first step. Then he makes it a public test right there in the hall. If Lewis can crush a gang without outside help, Edward will back him with pride. Edward barely starts to ask if Lewis will take it before Lewis cuts him off. "I'll do it!" Edward slides a box across the table, and Lewis takes it with a confident grin. Edward presents Lewis with the Wing of Arhat, a shining charm that can instantly carry its bearer to safety. Lewis nearly chokes when he hears it's worth 100 gold coins, 5 times the reward for the small fry gang job. For a second, the prize feels less like a bonus and more like a warning. Edward brushes it off as a parting gift, but his tone turns dead serious. Does Lewis understand why he's giving him this? Lewis grips the wing in his hand, eyes narrowed, sensing a danger ahead that Edward isn't spelling out. Lewis clutches the Wing of Arhat and cuts the line cleanly. That was Edward's last bit of help. From now on, he has to do everything himself. Edward just grins, wishing him good luck and cooing over how cute his little brother is. Lewis walks out into the open with the charm in hand, but the weight of his old life follows him. As a slave, he had no freedom, no power, no food. And eventually, he lost the one thing he still had, his life. Lewis is driven by one promise from his past. This time, he'll get the power to change the world. He clicks the Wing of Arhat into place, grips his sword, and heads out with everyone. He tells them that if they defeat a bandit gang, they'll finally be officially recognized as a family. He steadies himself and speaks the words that seal their fate. "Let's do our best." Sunlight bursts over the rooftops as the Lewis family rides out through the town street. Their first battle is finally underway. The mission nearly derails before the bandits even appear. Lewis's family floods the town shops, riding the excitement like a sugar rush, and Lewis realizes he overstepped his position. Gavin, dead serious, offers to cut off his own finger as an apology. Lewis shuts that down fast. Gavin's sense of duty is getting out of hand. Leo's smile turns sharp enough to make Lewis uneasy, so Lewis changes his mind and declares that his power is needed against the bandits. He'll take 10 of the 20. Someone fires back with 15. For Dad! Camus watches the whole mess like the most grown-up one there. Lewis suddenly realizes Sharon has vanished from the group. He finds her in the street, standing dead still like she's been struck by something. Passers-by can't help staring, whispering about what a hottie she is, but Lewis just clocks the problem. Sharon has completely spaced out. Nearby men wonder if they should call out to her until one shuts it down because she clearly has a boyfriend. Lewis tries to snap her back to reality, casually saying he's probably just her little brother. Sharon suddenly grabs him. "Mr. Lewis!" She clutches his hand, blushing hard, and forces out the words like they're tearing at her pride. There's something she really wants, and she'll work hard. Sharon drags Lewis straight to a glittering bargain stall and blurts it out before her courage can fail. She wants a sword from the sale. The street goes dead silent, then ugly. Men stare in shock, then burst into laughter, mocking her like she must think swords are jewelry. Lewis doesn't let the insult land. He tells Sharon not to mind them, steps up, and buys the sword anyway, asking the shopkeeper for the price. Sharon's new treasure is revealed with a glittery, ta-da, a ridiculous, flower-decked sword from the bargain stall. She hugs it to her chest, sparkling with joy, and gushes, "Thank you so much, Mr. Lewis." Lewis only smiles, thinking she's childish as always. Then the soft moment gets wrecked the second he turns back. The others are already making a racket in the shops, completely forgetting the bandit mission. Lewis has to snap, "Did you forget about our mission?" And they jolt awake as the day starts to slip away. Wind rips through the bandits' hideout, whipping a skull flag over a dirty path between two shabby buildings. The place is anything but prepared. A pot swings over a roaring fire, and the bandits inside are already drunk, stuffed, and laughing like this mission is a joke. Lewis, Sharon, Leo, and Camus reach the gang's hideout and immediately clock how huge it is for a small group. The bandits are laughing inside, but the mood drops the second they realize the place used to be a village. The gang killed all the villagers and took it over. Blood, abandoned toys, and ruined houses snap Leo into a rage. He snarls, "Unforgivable. I'll crush him." Lewis tries to hold him back, warning them to assess the enemy's strength first, but Camus is already itching to charge. Leo's rage gives them away. The bandits catch Leo and Sharon from behind, snarling, "What did you say about us?" Sharon goes blank with a silent, "Oops," while Leo's face twists into a panicked "Ack." Outside the hideout, the gangers clock the weapons at their waists. "Hey, look, they're armed." Camus can only sigh that this happened because Leo was too loud. Then the danger turns greedy. One bandit eyes Leo's coat and asks if he's a noble, already noticing the expensive fabric. Lewis's group is caught at the gang's doorstep, surrounded by armed men who now know they're worth robbing. The bandit's greed turns vicious. He's already imagining a ransom even bigger than what they made from killing and selling the villagers. At the hideout entrance, Sharon steps forward with her flower-decked sword drawn, putting herself between Lewis and the gang before he can move. She glances back at him, soft but steady. "Mr. Lewis, would you please allow me to take the lead?" Lewis, Leo, and Camus freeze as the bandits recognize Sharon from the city. "Isn't she that strange hottie we saw?" Their sneer wavers fast. The gangers ogle her and gulp. She stands there calm and unreadable, and even they can feel it. She's not just some pretty girl playing with a sword. Lewis gives her the lead. "Okay, I'm counting on you." Sharon beams and waves back. "Thank you very much." Then she launches herself at the hideout gang with her flower-decked sword, warning them that if they come to pick a fight at their own den, they have no right to complain about the consequences. Sharon tears through the bandits with the flower-decked sword, wind ripping around her as the gang gets knocked off balance and hurled back. One brute barely snarls, "Beat, bitch!" before she drives him into the wall hard enough to crack the place apart. As she keeps moving, she says she's indebted to Mr. Lewis for buying her this sword. And for saving us, when we were slaves. She dashes forward again, that childish blade cutting like it was made for war. Sharon's eyes burn with one promise: she'll work hard to repay Mr. Lewis. The flower-decked sword flashes through the gang, a clean slash tearing bodies off their feet and sending bandits crashing around her. Sharon's flower-decked sword flashes again, and the bandits are left stunned. She looks frail, but she hits like a monster. Lewis already knows why. It's obvious. She survived 20 years as a slave fighter. Sharon is beaming now, clutching the new sword and telling Lewis, "Mr. Lewis, this sword is so easy to use. Thank you very much." Lewis answers, "I see. I'm glad you like it," realizing the old sword was too big for her. This new one finally lets her show her full potential. The kids charge in, yelling that they won't lose to Miss Sharon. One blonde boy swings at an attacker and snarls, "This is for Dad." Sharon cuts through the gang with a cold stare, asking, "You're so slow! Are you asleep?" The boy is left panting hard, furious that if he were an adult, he could finally do what he wants. The black-haired boy watches the fight and blurts, "Wow, they're good." A bandit creeps up behind him, sneering, "Only cowards attack from behind, but since I'm a bandit, I don't care." Then the bandit brings his weapon down with a brutal, "Die." The black-haired boy drops in from above with a vicious slash, turning the bandit's ambush into a brutal counterattack. The masked brute is driven back through the leaves, snarling, "Bastard." Lewis stays low and close, slipping past the masked brute's sword as leaves burst around them. The brute swings wide, but the boy is already inside his reach, eyes sharp and pressure still on. The masked brute barely realizes Lewis is beside him before the blade rips through him. The kids are stunned by the speed of it. "Oh, what was that? Amazing!" "When did you cut him?" "That's our Mr. Lewis." Then they start tallying the kills. 8, 5, 10, 5, 1, and 1 more, until the count lands on the whole gang being wiped out. The white-haired attacker drives a brutal slash into Lewis's guard, the impact ringing out with a clang. Lewis barely holds the block, his face twisting in pain as his whole body trembles. The force hurls him backward through the air. He lands hard in the snow, one foot catching as he desperately tries to stay standing. A blast of wind tears through the snow as the white-haired attacker stands there like the storm itself is answering him. The kids react from the side. What the heck? Did they just gain a new member? But one of them is still cocky, insisting that no matter how many small fries join, none of them stand a chance against their dad. Lewis goes cold as he locks onto him. That smooth-haired man with the eye patch isn't just another brute. He feels like a real threat, and Lewis can't even finish the thought. Master Noble hums over tea in a lavish room, looking completely at ease. Across from him, Drinking Witch sits hunched and silent, the quiet between them feeling heavier than the porcelain on the table. Drinking Witch forces a smile and explains that the bandits are so tangled up in their own messes they can't help each other at all. Lord Edward tries to keep his cool, saying the crackdown on bandits is a good thing, and whoever gave the order must have had perfect judgment. His wife cuts in. "Indeed, dear, you aren't looking into my eyes." Then a guard bursts in, shouting, "Lord Edward!" The room goes still. Edward snaps, "Why are you yelling?" Only for the guard to hold up what they found when they cracked down on the gang he ordered. Someone immediately barks, "Dumbass, don't say that!" And Edward's face hardens. Edward's wife notices his face drain and whispers, "Dear?" He reads what the guard brought in, and his calm snaps into quiet horror. "Oh," he breathes. Then, "Oh no." His eye shakes, sweat crawling down his face as the realization hits him. Why did this man join this gang, now of all times? The white-haired attacker stands there like a walking disaster, and the wanted notice makes the threat clear, 100 gold coins for his head. Lewis's gaze hardens as he locks onto him. Edward sweats over the report, realizing this man is so dangerous that the bounty on him alone is 100 gold coins. The white-haired attacker's eye narrows, cold and certain. Lewis's gaze snaps back just as sharp, refusing to flinch. Then Lewis explodes forward, cloak whipping behind him as the attacker's blade screams through the air. The slash cuts through empty space where Lewis was a heartbeat earlier, because Lewis has already closed the distance and slams his sword into it with a brutal clang. Camus, the white-haired attacker, drops on Lewis under the moon, and their blades slam together with a sharp clang. The kids watching from below can barely track them. One mutters, "They're fast," another says their eyes can barely keep up. One kid insists, "I can see them," only to get snapped at. "You're looking in the wrong direction, idiot." Camus drives a brutal stab into Louis, and Louis snaps, "Who are you?" Camus studies him through the snow and mutters, "You look like a noble, but—" Then his eye narrows, sharp as a blade. "You're a slave fighter, aren't you?" Louis freezes, the accusation hitting harder than the fight itself. Camus spots the killing intent in Louis's style right away. This isn't noble swordplay. Louis realizes Camus has figured it out. Ever since reincarnating, he's trained on his own. But the foundation of his style still comes from the battles of his previous life. The kids snap into motion, shouting, "Stop dawdling! Let's help Dad!" One of them admits he can read the fight too because of his own past. Louis lunges forward, sword screaming, and hurls the accusation at Camus. "You're a hangman, right? What are you doing in a place like this?" The kids flinch as the blade whooshes past. Camus just grins like the whole fight has become a joke, only he understands. "You meet a lot of different people if you live long enough," he says. Louis answers cold and sharp, "Indeed." Now the truth is out in the open. Louis is an ex-slave fighter, and Camus is a hangman. Louis throws himself forward with his sword blazing and makes the fight personal. This battle doesn't end until one of them is dead. Orders rip through the mansion grounds. "Gather every soldier and hurry." Edward is already moving, cloak snapping as he points toward the road, while his wife demands to know what's going on, and another voice asks what the letter said. Edward's face tightens with fear as the answer spills out. The letter was about the gang Louis went after, and one of their members is Isaac the Butcher. Then the truth cuts even deeper. A hangman has to be strong for the worst reason. He's built to drag pain out for a blood-hungry audience. That's Isaac the Butcher. He is known to be especially cruel, the kind of man who can torture someone to death without blinking. Edward orders Isabella to stay put. She manages only. "Oh, okay." Then he charges after Louis, boots slamming, shouting, "Wait for me, Louis! Just stay safe until we arrive!" Isaac the Butcher has Louis trapped in a cruel wire technique, slicing his flesh while carefully avoiding the vitals. He asks, "Perfect, don't you think?" Then he explains that he chopped off and rebuilt his own arms just to hurt slaves more delicately, and even cut his own lips to add a spice called fear. Louis, pinned and sweating, can only spit back, "You monster!" Isaac sneers that Louis's fancy clothes are just a gaudy cover for the filthy blood of an ex-slave. Louis, sweating and battered, still manages a sharp little smile. "Heh, I'm not trying to hide it." The kids watch in horror as Isaac keeps cutting into Louis, slowly torturing their dad right in front of them. They try to force themselves to help. "We have to help him." But their bodies won't obey, and the screams of Isaac's victims freeze the truth into their bones. "Can't we move?" Isaac keeps carving into Louis outside the house while Lost watches, hollow-eyed, and mutters, "He'll definitely die." The memory of Louis's promise hits hard. He talked big. "In that case, I'll accept all of them as my children." Lost's hope curdles. This is why I shouldn't have hoped for anything. Then, the past drags him back to the night he heard his mother was ill and ran away with Miss Sharon to see her one last time. The cruelest part isn't that Camus' mother died. It's that she spent her last days happy with someone else after selling him to a slave trader. Young Camus stands outside the house, completely unseen. She never notices him. The laughter from inside keeps cutting deeper, and he convinces himself she probably never thought about him at all, not even when she died. Miss Sharon catches up and calls, "Camus?" But something in him hardens right there. He decides it's so annoying to care. From now on, he'll trust only his slave friends and food. Young Camus wants to grow up as fast as possible. He peeks through a window and sees his mother with another child asking, "Who's that?" The answer is just, "I don't know," and that tiny dismissal cuts him open. Sharon catches up panting and wraps him in her arms, but the hurt has already hardened into something colder. A rush of memories follows, the other children laughing, playing, bleeding, and surviving together. Then Camus throws himself into training, tears in his eyes, because he has decided strength means never needing anyone again. When I grow up and become strong, I wouldn't have to rely on others. I wouldn't be betrayed. Lost is split open by a vicious slash and hurled through the air before he can even scream. Isaac, the butcher, doesn't even flinch. He says he has no problem cutting up kids. Lost crashes to the ground, bleeding and shaking, while Isaac calmly tells him to relax because he won't die. It only hurts like hell. The sword of light snaps into place and flares out, but wound absorption kicks in and swallows the hit. The other boy coughs blood, while the blond boy freezes in disbelief as the wound vanishes from his chest. Lost's wound transfers straight into Lewis, and Isaac the butcher is thrilled by the trick. Lewis takes the stab without flinching, then promises to torture him slowly. Lost breaks down, unable to understand why Lewis is protecting him when even his real mother abandoned him. A flashback tears open. The kids are stabbed in the legs as they try to crawl toward Dad. One blonde kid snarls. He'll be the first to save him. Another snaps back that it'll be him instead. Panic spikes into screams, but one of them cuts through it with a cold, "Shut up!" A violent burst tears through the moment, a blazing strike in the center. A girl screams, "Dad!" while the boy beside her insists, "I'm healed." Lewis, bloodied and huffing, orders the kids to run. One of them stammers, "But," until Sharon snaps that they're a bother to Mr. Lewis and tells them to leave. A child apologizes and follows. The kids shake in the rain, remembering that Lewis saved them when they were slaves. Now he's risking his life to protect them again. They break down, furious at their own helplessness. Why can't we do anything? For him? Lost understands the worst part. The others trust Lewis completely. The white-haired man doesn't care about the kids at all. He only wants a bloodied Lewis, and he presses him. "I'm only interested in you. Who are you?" Lewis answers like he's tearing open a buried life. "I used to be a slave fighter. After dying in the arena, I reincarnated as the child of a noble." The white-haired man already knows, and that cold makes the reveal feel like a trap snapping shut. The white-haired man accepts Lewis's story with a cold, "Yeah, I see." Then he starts clapping like it's entertainment, sneering that Lewis was a slave so long his daydreaming habit never left. He calls the reincarnation story fun, but Lewis doesn't look amused at all. Lewis gives a bitter little laugh and asks, "A daydream?" The truth hits harder through his memory. Before he died in his past life, he wished for power. Even after being reborn, he thought that life might have only been a dream until he met Sharon. Lewis finally lets it slip. Finally, now, I've slowly begun gathering it. The white-haired man catches the shift and snaps, "You're gathering power?" But he doesn't look scared. He laughs like Lewis has lost his mind, roaring that he's already dead and that his worthless fantasies end here. Then the fight detonates with a brutal boom. Lewis refuses to fall. He pushes through the blast, clothes torn and body battered, but his eyes stay sharp and his swords remain ready. The aura around him roars, tearing the very air apart, making the explosion feel less like the end of the fight and more like the moment Lewis finally snaps awake. Camus freezes in shock, the realization hitting hard. Leo and Gavin must have grown strong like this too, but then the truth cuts through him. I was wrong. Camus drives forward, roaring with power. He is done expecting the worst, done wasting strength on the fear of betrayal. Now, for the people he truly trusts, he moves with everything he has. Lewis's resolve erupts as he roars that he will become the kid's power. Camus sneers, calling him cocky for a slave, but Lewis fires right back, "I see through you, hangman!" The next instant, Camus lunges, and their blades slam together in a vicious, ear-splitting slash. Camus lets Lewis's blade bite him on purpose, turning the wound into the opening he desperately needed. Lewis recognizes the hangman's old training in the move. Camus knows exactly how to maim, not finish cleanly. So Camus eats the slash, closes the gap, and grabs for a counter before Lewis can pull free. The kids scream for him to hurry, and a younger Lewis snaps back, "Leave it to me!" The old slave number 73 blazes like a brand in the darkness. Then Camus crashes down with cutting light. Blade, the white-hot slash tearing straight toward Louis. The white-haired boy scratches his head, explaining that the plan backfired because he kept inflicting pain instead of going for the kill, locking him into the hangman role. Then he snaps at the black-haired boy that he's grateful for the help, but it's annoying when he gets beaten to a pulp every time. It just makes him feel guilty, and he's pissed. Finally, he stammers, trying to say what he really means. Anyway, what I want to say is that. Camus jabs a finger at Louis and tells him it's sad for the kids when their dad dies, so he needs to value his life a little more. Louis just smiles through the blood and answers, "Okay, thank you, Camus." The kids instantly start roasting him, calling him a tsundere brat, and laughing that his personality seems to have shifted now that he's stronger, just like Leo and Gavin did, while Camus snaps at them to watch their tongues when they speak to Dad. Armored riders thunder away in a cloud of stomping hooves, and the girl nearly tumbles as she screams for Louis the horse. Her brother finally notices Louis is bleeding, and when he apologizes for breaking Arcat's wing, the girl snaps that it doesn't matter. Then the brother panics. The bandits are still out there, and Isaac is missing. Isaac is shown bloodied and quiet, while the sudden mention of Hangman draws a startled "Ha!" The village street is a slaughterhouse after the fight. Bodies are scattered between shattered houses, broken windows stare out into the night, and torn flags lie in the dirt. A young strike team stands ready in the wreckage, weapons in hand, as the announcement rings out. The Lewis family eliminated him. Edward Spencer, heir of the Spencer family, freezes as the crowd starts buzzing about the Lewis family. He can't believe the 5 of them took down 20 bandits and brought Isaac back. Then he spots Louis and realizes, that's my Louis. He steps forward, calls everyone to attention, and officially recognizes the birth of the Lewis family, drawing a stunned, "Ooh!" She rattles a door and curses, "Damn it!" exploding over the fact that sending her strongest fighter against Louis was for nothing. She snaps that she wasted her time brainwashing a filthy slave trader, and even has to bark at Sue to stop licking her feet. After a cold, whatever, and a sharp, Lost mutters, "Next time." While drinking Witch clings to him, promising, "It'll be different." The premise lands hard. A reincarnated former slave has become the strongest noble, aiming for the top of the world, with his older daughter right beside him. A fragment of hair and a sharp, cut-off W are all that come through, as if someone has just been hit with a shock and can't force the next word out. Camus drops from the moonlit sky in a blur, blade flashing toward Louis as the air tears around them. The clash is so fast, the onlookers can barely track it. One gasps, "They're fast." Another admits, "My eyes can barely keep up," while Camus declares, "I can see them." Louis just snaps back, "You're looking in the wrong direction, idiot." Rain lashes down as Louis drives a stab into Camus with a brutal thud, demanding, "Who are you?" Camus only stares back, silent at first, before cutting through the disguise. "You look like a noble, but—" He leans in close and finishes, "You're a slave fighter, aren't you?" Louis freezes, sweat on his face, realizing Camus has seen straight through him. Camus nails the truth. Louis's swordsmanship isn't noble technique at all. It's a style built to doggedly chase an opponent's life with lethal zeal. Louis's composure cracks for a breath. He realizes Camus has figured it out. Since reincarnating, he's trained alone. But the core of his fighting style still comes from the brutal battles he survived in his previous life. Camus stands under the open sky, one visible eye cold and steady behind his scarred mask. He answers Louis's silence, as if he's already read every secret hidden in his sword. "You meet a lot of different people if you live long enough." Louis stays quiet, but the weight of it hits hard. Camus isn't guessing anymore. He recognizes the killing style Louis thought he had buried. The courtyard erupts with stomping boots as a man barks, "Hurry!" and orders soldiers to gather as many as possible. A woman panics, "What's going on, dear?" asking what was written in the letter. He answers, "It was about the gang Louis went after," then drops the name. One of their members is Isaac the Butcher. The reveal cuts deep. Isaac is a hangman, an executioner of slaves. The roar rolls over the crowd like a curse. A hangman is the person who entertains an audience hungry for blood. A blade tears through the air with terrifying precision, and Camus asks, "Perfect, don't you think?" He explains that his technique cuts flesh without touching the vitals, then drops the real horror. He cut and modified himself to make it work. Louis just goes silent, staring as the truth hits harder than the slash. Isaac spits that Louis's fancy clothes can't hide the dirty blood of an ex-slave, but Louis just grins. "Heh, I'm not trying to hide it." Louis hammers him with a brutal blow, and the kids realize he's slowly torturing their dad. Lost, Birth, and Moon are desperate to help Isaac. One pleads, "We have to help him," while another can only whisper, "But why?" In the rain, they stare at the bodies hanging on crosses behind them, frozen in horror, and Lost screams, "Can't we move?" Outside a cabin, young Camus watches a brutal fight and sighs, certain the man will die. The memory of a dark-haired man promising to take all the children in only deepens his bitterness. "This is why I shouldn't have hoped for anything." He remembers running away with Miss Sharon to see his sick mother one last time, and the old wound still aches. Young Camus finds the mother who sold him to a slave trader, living her last days with someone else, laughing inside a cabin as if she never had a son to abandon. He stands outside in the dark, and she doesn't even notice him. The thought twists into something bitter. She probably never thought about him once until she died. When Sharon calls his name, he's already decided the only things worth trusting are his slave, friends, and food. Young Camus' wish is simple and desperate: grow up as fast as possible. The memory stabs from both sides. His mother once held him close, warm, and breathing against him, but outside her cabin she only squints at him with another child beside her and asks, "Who's that?" From the dark, the answer is just, "I don't know." Around that rejection, scraps of the life he still clings to flash by: noisy food, his slave friends, and then one of them choking on blood with an "ugh." That pain hardens into his vow. When he grows up and becomes strong, he won't have to rely on anyone. Young Camus gets sliced across the torso, blood spraying as the masked attacker stays completely calm. "I have no problem with cutting up kids." Camus collapses to the ground, shaking and bleeding, while the man offers a cruel little mercy. "Relax, you won't die, it only hurts like hell." The masked attacker triggers the sword with a mechanical whir click, calmly naming it the Sword of Light. Then, wound absorption erupts in a white slash that slams into young Camus. Young Camus blurts, Did my wound transfer to Mr. Louis?" The masked attacker realizes Louis has taken over the brat's pain and grins, saying he doesn't know how Louis did it, but it's fun. Louis, stabbed through the torso while standing between Camus and the sword, promises to torture him slowly. Camus breaks down, crying, "Why? Are you protecting me? Even my real mother abandoned me. Even my real mother abandoned me." A bloodied man can't move as blades stab into him, screaming for his legs to obey. The kids around him argue through the panic, knees shaking, each one claiming they'll be the first to save Dad. A fighter cuts the attacker down with a brutal slash, silencing the chaos with a cold, "Shut up." The man erupts into a blood-soaked scream while the girl watches, stunned. A burst of light cracks open, and the girl screams, "Dad!" As the man gasps, "I'm healed." Louis, bloodied and huffing, forces out, "Guys, run!" One of the kids stammers, "But..." Before Sharon cuts in, "You heard him, didn't you? Let's go. We're a bother to Mr. Louis." The kids scramble to obey, one apologizing and another answering, "Yes, Miss Sharon." The kids stumble through the grass, crushed by the same thought. Louis saved them when they were slaves, and now he's risking his life to protect them. So why are they just running? Sharon's face breaks as she sobs, "Why can't we do anything for him?" Lost watches them and finally understands, "I see. They trust him." Then his own voice goes quiet, almost wounded. They too. Louis's aura erupts, and Camus goes still in shock. Louis recognizes him, and the memory of Leo and Gavin hits him hard. Did they get stronger like this too? In the roar of his power, Lewis admits, "I was wrong." Then he drives forward anyway, vowing not to keep expecting betrayal from the people he truly trusts. Lewis takes it in with a quiet, "Yeah," and an even colder, "I see." His scarred, stitched face stays still, but that single exposed eye says the truth has finally clicked into place. The truth cuts through the silence. Finally, now, I've slowly begun gathering it. Lewis stays motionless, but his scarred, stitched face and single exposed eye turn ice cold. The hunt has already started. Lewis lets the power he was gathering explode outward, a roaring aura tearing around him as his hair whips up and the ground fractures beneath his boots. Scarred and still, he plants himself with a sword in each hand, his single exposed eye cold. The hunt is no longer waiting in silence. Lewis snaps at Camus to value his life, warning that the kids would be crushed if their dad dies. Camus just smiles through the blood and says okay, and Lewis thanks him for it. The others immediately roast Lewis for turning into a tsundere brat now that he's stronger, laughing that it's hilarious and comparing him to Leo and Gavin. Lewis bristles, tells them to watch their tongues when they speak to Dad, and threatens to purge them. Lewis's rage explodes as he roars that he will become their power. The hangman only sneers, calling him cocky for a slave. Lewis snaps back, "I see through you, hangman." Then their blades slam together in a brutal, sparking slash. Camus is caught in a deadly web of blades, and Lewis screams his name. Lewis lets that fear sharpen into one answer. The hangman's job is torturing slaves, so he's trained not to kill an opponent in one blow. That weakness is exactly what Lewis needed. He clamps down with a roar, "Just as I thought." His eye burns with the next move, "I can create." Lewis shouts, "Now, hurry!" And Camus answers, "Leave it to me." He drives his sword forward with cutting light. Blade, a white-hot slash that tears right through the blade web closing in on him. The burst of light turns his desperate escape into a vicious counterattack. The hangman's torture-first approach backfires because he keeps inflicting pain instead of going for the kill. Lewis scratches his head, embarrassed, and starts, "Listen." Then he pokes Camus in the face and snaps, "I'm glad you're helping us. But it's annoying when you get beaten to a pulp every time. It makes us feel guilty, you know? I'm so pissed." Camus freezes, and Lewis's face tightens as he struggles to finish anyway. What I want to say is that Lewis warns Camus to value his life, pointing out that the kids would be devastated if their dad dies. Camus simply smiles through the blood and agrees, earning a quiet "thank you" from Lewis. The group immediately roasts Lewis for acting like a tsundere brat now that he's stronger, noting he changed, just like Leo and Gavin. Lewis bristles, snaps at them to watch their tongues when they speak to Dad, and threatens to purge them. A short-haired onlooker goes rigid as the ground starts to rumble under a brutal stomp, stomp, stomp. Beside them, a long-haired girl clutches her phone and blurts, "Whoa, Lewis!" Ahead, a mass of armored fighters marches in formation, each step hammering the street like a warning. The Lewis family stands triumphant in a wrecked street, bodies and torn banners scattered behind them, declaring that they eliminated him. The armored crowd breaks into shocked chatter over the Lewis family, and Edward Spencer freezes when he realizes the 5 of them took down 20 bandits and Isaac. Then he looks at Lewis with fierce pride. "That's my Lewis." He introduces himself as the heir of the Spencer family and officially recognizes the birth of the Lewis family. Drinking Witch shakes in frustration, yelling, "Damn it!" because sending their strongest guy against him was all for nothing, especially after she wasted her time brainwashing the filthy slave trader. Lost just answers, whatever, and she huffs back, "Humph." Then Lost mutters, "Next time," while Drinking Witch clings to him, insisting, "It'll be different." After Isaac the Butcher is defeated, Lewis is so wrecked that he falls asleep on the carriage Edward gave him, rattling back toward the city. The wheels keep shaking, but he's dead asleep. Then, in the dark, a long-haired woman slides close enough to rustle against him and gently boops his cheek. Lewis's eye cracks open. Sharon leans over the exhausted Lewis, her face soft but trembling with a feeling she can barely keep buried. He lies beneath her, beaten and still, while petals drift around them, and the whole moment turns painfully quiet. Lewis wakes to Sharon hovering over him, and before she can even ask if he's awake, he stares at her like he's seeing something sacred. "So beautiful," he murmurs. Sharon freezes, embarrassed and confused, asking, "What?" Lewis answers softly that she's like the goddess of hope. Lewis compares Sharon's hair to the beautiful hair of a noble that once gave hope to downtrodden slave fighters. Sharon's eye widens, stunned by the weight of the comparison. Then Lewis's head thuds down as he drops asleep on her lap, and the escorts outside notice the sudden stillness and call out, "What's wrong?" Sharon is still flustered from Lewis's compliment, trying to cover it with a tiny nothing. Camus catches the stutter instantly, grinning as he asks why she's stumbling, then leans in to tease, "Miss Sharon, could it be you? Have a crush?" Sharon fires back with a stunned, "What?" While Lost in Birth stare at the crush hawk, Bird entry in the book and echo the same baffled, "What?" Lost in Birth keep chasing the crush hawk, shouting, "Where?" and turn as the carriage rattles on. Sharon, flustered, stammers, What are you talking about?" Why, one of the boys mutters, "Do I need to say it clearly? And ignorant?" Then Camus leans in and drops the blunt guess. "Maybe Miss Sharon likes Dad?" The reply lands. "That's what I'm saying." And Lewis explodes with a huge, "Wah!" "Oh, of course not." Sharon's denial explodes, but the furious blush burning across her face betrays her instantly. Camus' teasing turns the carriage into absolute chaos. One kid argues that Lewis looks like an old man anyway, making the age gap perfectly fine, while another snaps at Camus to watch his tongue, only to immediately admit Lewis's mind truly is ancient. Sharon tries to defend herself with logic, stammering about being 25 and Lewis being 18, but she's already losing the argument to her own panic. Desperate, she forces out the heavier reason it can't be true. Lewis is their parent, and she is his child. Besides, Sharon tries to throw out one last excuse, but Camus cuts through it with a careless shrug. It isn't that simple. While the boys bicker, one insisting Miss Sharon is a great woman, another snapping about a brat, Camus drops the ugly logic right in her lap. Lewis is a noble, which means he will marry for political reasons, crashes into her mind, a grand wedding hall, cheers roaring, a bride standing beside Lewis, every detail chosen by status rather than feeling. Then Camus lands the final blow. "You're so dumb! Dad is a noble!" Sharon freezes. The crush she's been desperately... Camus refuses to let Sharon dodge the truth. Lewis is a noble. She freezes, stunned, while one of the boys can only mutter, yeah, as if the answer is painfully obvious. The teasing keeps twisting the knife. One snaps at Camus for getting cocky, reminding him he used to be more docile, but Camus just keeps shoving the thought forward. Soon, the boys start picturing Lewis's future fiancée. Of course, she would be beautiful, because she would be a noble, too. Sharon's denial doesn't just stumble now, it gets completely boxed in by rank, politics, and the inevitable future Camus is forcing her to imagine. Sharon demands to know why one of them changed so suddenly, and the answer comes instantly. "Because I awakened. Duh." The boys realize that formally recognizing Lewis as their father made a sudden rush of power flood their bodies, and one declares it the ultimate sign of their loyalty to Dad. "Mystery solved," he boasts, until another boy tilts his head, suddenly wondering if something about that explanation doesn't quite add up. If that's true, one of the boys points out, why hasn't Sharon awakened yet when she was the very first to recognize Lewis as Dad? Sharon freezes, barely able to breathe out a choked, "Ah!" The boys start poking relentlessly at the contradiction. But Sharon's mind violently jumps to the only answer that actually hurts: Lewis marrying a noblewoman in a cold political match. Sharon snaps, slapping the boys, and instantly recoiling in horror at her own violent reaction. She clutches her head as the dreadful thought pounds against her skull. She tries to force herself to believe it doesn't concern her, even as she stubbornly reminds herself that she, too, has beautiful hair like a noble. By the next day, the rattling carriage finally grinds to a halt at a towering castle. At the castle, Master Noble sits with Louis in a quiet rose garden gazebo and opens with a heavy, "So, Louis," he asks how his brother is holding up, and Louis answers with a bright, suspiciously casual smile, "All is well, my hair is so smooth." Birds chirp peacefully while Master Noble just sits there in dead, heavy silence. Master Noble cuts straight through the hair joke, demanding to know how Louis's health actually is. Louis tries to brush it off as nothing, just a scratch, healed after a good night's sleep, before finally admitting the truth. Fighting Isaac left him more wounded than he has been since being reborn as a noble. Still, even that barely compares to the starvation, open wounds, and brutal battles he survived in his previous life. Master Noble praises him for walking away from the infamous Isaac with only a scratch, but then he drops the real bomb. Yesterday, he publicly announced that Isaac was defeated. Louis freezes. Master Noble throws his arms wide, presenting it like a miracle. The people need to know Isaac the Butcher was defeated, because it will finally give them peace of mind. Then he reveals his real move. He made absolutely sure everyone knows the one who did it was his little brother, Louis Spencer. Louis offers a quiet, "Thank you very much, brother," but Master Noble isn't done. With the looming castle behind him, he declares that the Spencer family is about to become famous. However, in this delicate situation, that kind of fame might not be a gift at all. Louis refuses to let Isaac's defeat become his personal trophy. If people start whispering that it was all staged, he tells Master Noble to let it go. He will bury the noise by producing real, undeniable results. Master Noble is stunned that Louis already thinks like a seasoned noble, and his grin turns absolutely massive. "Splendid, Louis! And cute, my little brother!" He slams open a heavy treasure chest and pours support straight onto him, Louis's backing, plus Isaac's entire bounty, because saving people from that vicious hangman is worth every single coin. Louis can only stare, completely shaken. Louis accepts the support with a smooth, "Thank you very much," and immediately turns it into a mission. Meeting expectations is one thing, but the real target is exactly why he has to release every slave in the world. That vow lands cold and certain, as if the sudden wealth just bought him a path straight into the slave system's throat. Across the table, Edward melts into a hard-eyed, "Brother, Chi," and Louis calmly answers, "I'm here." Edward storms in, deeply offended that nobody is melting over his grand arrival. But Master Noble just acts like Louis is already the cute little brother he cares about most. Then Master Noble clasps his hands together and practically begs Louis to buy him the tear of resex. Louis shuts it down instantly. No, that is the Dudley family's sacred treasure, not some cheap trinket they would ever sell. But Edward's grin turns sly. It seems they will. Edward's rumor hits like a hammer. The Dudley family might go completely bankrupt after a massive business mistake. Louis goes rigid, his eye twitching as the castle behind them seems to crack under the sheer shock of the words, and he snaps, "What?" When he demands to know who told Edward, Edward just grins and claims he heard it from a trustworthy source, then refuses to name them, laughing that it's a secret. Edward still won't give up the source for free, grinning that Louis has to be nice if he wants the answer. Louis doesn't play along. His mood turns razor-sharp as he asks the real question, is it true that the Dudley family exploits serfs? Edward answers without a hint of hesitation, "Yeah, it's true. Why?" Louis smirks. The rumor just became a target. Master Noble and Louis stand face to face in a blaze of light, and Master Noble's pride erupts. "Splendid! That's my Louis. I'll look into the rumors. And you should set off as soon as possible." Louis answers with a sharp, "Yes, brother." But the instant Louis turns to leave, Master Noble is left completely alone, screaming into the void that he's been abandoned all over again. The trip to the Dudley family starts with an immediate name, disaster. One of the boys can't remember the destination and guesses the Nutley family. Sharon snaps back, Cutley. Another boy barks the real name, Dudley, while the last one just shrugs, deciding that minor details don't matter anyway. One of the kids asks why Lewis even cares that a noble house is going bankrupt and whether he is secretly planning to help them. Lewis answers without hesitation, no, he isn't interested in nobles. But then he drops the real reason they are going. He heard a rumor that the Dudley family is exploiting serfs, and if they are truly collapsing financially, they will definitely sell those serfs off just to survive. Lewis lays out the brutal possibility. If the Dudley family collapses, those poor people will get exploited in coal mines, on ships, or in an arena. The thought makes everyone freeze. Lost snaps, slamming his fist down. Like us? Hell no, I won't let them do that. The black-haired girl agrees, drawing her blade with a sharp clink. We can't let more people meet such a cruel fate. But Lewis quickly reins them in, his tone calm and grounding. Calm down. It's still just a possibility. It's not set in stone. A dark-haired boy just smirks at the outrage, while a white-haired girl nearby blushes. Berth leans close to Sharon and quietly asks, "What's wrong?" Sharon completely short-circuits, letting out a flustered, spiraling "HYU!" Berth just echoes the weird little cry right back at her. But as they step outside the village, his concern turns dead serious. She has been acting strange lately, and he demands to know if something is actually bothering her. Sharon is still rattled, insisting the guy's weird comments are the exact reason she froze up. Berth laughs it off and pivots, asking how she is actually connected to the Dudley family. The only link is that both families are nobles, until Berth suddenly remembers there were once talks of an engagement with a lady from that family close to his age. Moon goes completely, terrifyingly silent as the heavy implication finally lands. Moon freezes at the word fiancé, the entire implication hitting her like a physical slap. Berth tries to brush it off fast, insisting it was long ago, it doesn't matter now, and it won't interfere with today's mission. Camus, however, grins like he just found a fatal weakness and needles him relentlessly. "All right, Dad, but you still might get engaged to another noble lady, right?" Berth hesitates, then admits, "Well, that's possible, I guess." The mood instantly turns suffocatingly awkward as the others react. Lost can't resist teasing Sharon about Berth, possibly getting engaged again, dropping a sharp, "Too bad, Miss Sharon." Sharon laughs it off at first, but then he offers his condolences, and the joke turns razor-sharp as the meaning clicks. He pushes her to say something, but she just freezes, stunned. Then he gets serious, telling her to view Berth as their dad who deserves respect because their statuses are simply too different. Moon's insecurity cuts through the comedy. Someone praises her beautiful, noble-like hair, and she quietly admits she knows that much. The quiet punch lands when Moon thinks to herself, "I'm not a noble. Lost and Moon are." Berth and Lost hit the old wound head-on. Since we used to be slaves, one starts and the other finishes, we're good at giving up on our dreams, right? Sharon is caught between them, completely silent. Suddenly, Moon's attention snaps to the horizon as she spots the water and calls out, "Hey, I can already see the sea!" A dark-haired boy races toward the coast, and when he reaches the edge, he just stands there with the vast ocean in front of him, tightly clutching a photograph. Sharon cuts through the old wound with a sharp, defensive denial. "As I said, you're wrong. I'm not dumb enough to fall in love with a noble." Her hand tightens painfully in her hair as she adds, "Also," the word drags her straight back to a memory of a dark-haired boy kneeling beside her, his hands on her shoulders, trying to steady her. Then Lost's face fills the silence, calm and completely unreadable as he quietly repeats, "Also." Sharon wears a soft, strained smile. Out at the coast, Lost stands at the broken seawall, his cape snapping violently in the wind, and she quietly admits the truth she's been hiding. "I still haven't given up on him." The title hits in stock, unforgiving black, "Died a slave, reborn a noble." A former slave, reborn as the strongest noble, is still chasing the world's strongest, even with an older girl by his side. After Lewis defeats Isaac the Butcher, Edward provides a carriage for the return to the city, but Lewis is so completely wrecked that he falls asleep before they even reach the gates. The wheels rattle through the dark night as he slumps unconscious. Then, a blonde woman rustles close beside him. Something gives a soft boop, and Lewis's eye snaps violently open. Chapter 7. Sharon's Feelings. Sharon bends over Lewis with a fragile, deeply conflicted look, soft light spilling across her hair and face. Lewis lies pinned beneath her, one eye wide open, suddenly caught in the quiet, crushing weight of her unspoken feelings. Lewis jolts awake under Sharon's intense gaze. When she leans over, asking, "Are you awake, Mr. Lewis?" He doesn't answer, he just stares. Her hair rustles around them in the quiet carriage as Lewis, wrecked and dazed, whispers, "So beautiful." Sharon freezes, completely thrown off. "What?" But Lewis keeps staring like he's seeing something far beyond her, struggling to finish the thought. "You're like, the..." Lewis's dazed murmur finally finishes the thought. Moon's beautiful hair, shining like a noble's, is a ray of hope for downtrodden slave fighters. Moon's eye tightens as the heavy words land. In the rattling carriage, her hair shivers, and she suddenly folds over, making the others snap. What's wrong? While Lewis's head just thuds heavily against the seat beside her, still dead asleep. Sharon blushes furiously and stammers, Nothing." When Lost asks why she is suddenly stuttering. He laughs, openly needling her with a teasing, "Ha ha, Miss Sharon, could it be you?" leaving her completely frozen in the trap. Lost presses Sharon in the carriage to say it clearly, while another girl demands, "Where?" And Sharon stammers, What are you talking about?" Birth pushes her to just say it. Then Lost smirks and drops the bomb. "Maybe Miss Sharon likes Dad?" Sharon blushes fiercely and finally answers, "That's what I'm saying." Birth goes rigid, then erupts. "What?" Sharon blushes so hard she can barely force the words out. "Oh, of course not." She desperately tries to defend the age gap, stammering, "I'm 25, and Mr. Lewis is 18. Camus needles her relentlessly. "You think so? Dad looks kinda like an old man, so I think it's okay." Sharon snaps back, "Watch your tongue, Camus. Dad is a handsome young man. Only his mind is that of an old man." Camus instantly hits back with a triumphant grin. "So you admit he's like an old man?" Sharon starts with a weak, "Besides," but the boy cuts in with a shrug, admitting, "Well, I guess it's not as easy as it seems." Sharon freezes, caught completely off guard. Before she can recover, the argument snaps into a new gear when a dark-haired kid fires, "You're just a brat." And the white-haired boy shoots back, "Huh? How do you know?" Sharon freezes when the black-haired girl admits, Yeah." And Camus drops the ultimate bomb, "He's a noble." On the wagon, the talk turns razor-sharp. Camus mutters, "I guess you're right," while someone wonders if his future fiancée is beautiful. Another voice fires back, "Of course she looks good, because she would be a noble too." The black-haired girl cuts in sharply, "Hold on, Camus," but he just goes dead silent. Then she snaps, "Why the heck are you so cocky? You used to be more docile," just as he reaches for his weapon. Camus throws it out like it's the most obvious thing in the world. "Because I awakened." Duh. Sharon demands to know why he changed so suddenly, and the answer lands hard. Once they formally recognized Dad as Dad, raw power flooded their bodies. Camus calls that proof that their awakening is a direct sign of loyalty to Dad, and for a second, the mystery sounds completely solved. Then he turns it entirely on its head. "In that case, don't you find it strange?" The blonde man can only stare and answer, "What?" Sharon catches the tiny crack in Camus' logic and leans heavily into it, her voice turning razor-sharp with suspicion. "If that's true..." A slapstick burst suddenly shatters the tension. One character yells, "Why am I shocked?" while another snaps, "I'm not planning to," as cheeks get playfully slapped and pulled. A long-haired character freezes with a throbbing headache, murmuring, "But, even though it doesn't concern me," before quietly admitting, I also have beautiful hair like a noble. Inside the quiet garden gazebo, two dark figures sit across from each other as the heavy meeting begins with a loaded, "So, Lewis?" Two birds bicker overhead, one insisting he is asking about health, not hair, while the other shrugs off the wound as just a scratch after a good night's sleep. Across from him, the long-haired man grins, impressed that Lewis survived the infamous Isaac with only a scratch. Lewis admits that, honestly, it was the most wounded he has been since reincarnating as a noble, flashing back to a ragged version of himself, starving, bloodied, and surviving multiple battles. He adds that it still wasn't as bad as the triple handicap he suffered in his previous life. The man's smile stays easy as he drops the real bomb. "By the way, Lewis, yesterday I publicly announced that Isaac..." Lewis's brother strides through the street, shining with absolute pride, insisting, "The people need to know Isaac the Butcher has been defeated so they can finally have peace of mind." Lewis only manages a quiet, "I see." Then the brother drops the part Lewis clearly did not ask for. He made absolutely sure everyone knows the one who did it was his little brother, Lewis Spencer. Lewis forces out a strained, "Thank you very much, brother," already sweating under the crushing attention. Outside the mansion, the brother drives it home. Now the Spencer family will become famous. But his expression abruptly darkens, and he starts with a heavy, "However, in this..." Lewis already anticipates the criticism coming. People will say Isaac's defeat wasn't his achievement, just a plan cooked up by the Spencer family. His brother is weirdly delighted by how politically sharp Lewis is, exclaiming, "Wow, you already understand such things." Lewis tells him not to worry. They should ignore the talk and bury it with more results. That answer makes his brother beam. Calling Lewis splendid and cute, he declares he won't hold back his support anymore and slams open a heavy chest. Inside is a ridiculous pile of coins, his brother's support money and Isaac's bounty. A hooded figure thanks him deeply, surrounded by a flurry of fluttering birds. The black-haired young man answers with a cold, unshakable conviction that cuts straight through everything. He knows exactly why he has to release every single slave in the world. The younger brother storms in, furious that the older brother barely reacts to his arrival, loudly calling himself his cute little brother. The older brother just stares back while counting coins and deadpans that his cute little brother is already here. Then the younger brother clasps his hands and begs to buy the tier of resex, but the older brother immediately shuts him down with a brutal, flat no. The Dudley family might go bankrupt. The words hit like a deafening warning bell over a grand, cracking cathedral, its walls groaning with a heavy crumble, as if the entire noble house is starting to collapse from the inside out. Lewis presses Edward for the answer, but Edward just grins and dangles it, saying he will only tell if Lewis acts kindly toward him. A sharp bam cracks the air as Edward snaps, "What is it, Lewis?" Then Lewis leans in, eyes hard, and asks the question that can't be ignored. Is it true that the Dudley family, the words hang there, heavy and unfinished? Lewis and his brother lock eyes in a blazing stare-down, both grinning like the plan has finally clicked into place. The brother approves with booming pride, "Splendid, that's my Lewis." He promises to look into the rumors and tells Lewis to set off as soon as possible. Lewis answers with a sharp, "Yes, brother." Meanwhile, Berth is left blinking in total confusion. Huh? What? As a little sketch beside him spells out the brutal reality, alone. Then, outside, as the others fly away, Berth snaps, "Grrr, I was abandoned again." Berth asks where they are going and guesses, "To the Nutley family." Drinking Witch snaps back, "Idiot, it's the Cupley family." Moon corrects him again, rolling her eyes, "The Dudley family. Who's the idiot here?" Sword just cuts through the bickering with a dismissive, "Minor details don't matter." Moon asks Sword why a noble going bankrupt should concern him at all, and whether he plans to intervene. Sword lays out the brutal possibility. If the noble family collapses, those poor people could be thrown into coal mines, onto ships, or into an arena. Drinking Witch gulps at the grim thought. Lost instantly snaps, "Like us? Hell no, I won't let them do that." Drinking Witch fires up too, declaring, "We can't let more people meet such a cruel fate." Sword quickly tries to rein them in, his voice grounding the panic. It's still just a possibility. It's not set in stone. Calm down. Sharon suddenly leans into Sword's personal space, letting out a panicked, high-pitched, "Hi-A-U" when he catches her. He echoes the sound, completely baffled. As they navigate the crowded town streets, Sword keeps glancing at her, his brow furrowed. "You okay? You've been acting weird. Is something bothering you?" Sharon's face burns red. "Jeez, it's because the guy said weird things," she stammers, but her panic only pushes Moon to press forward. The white-haired girl steps up, a forced, awkward laugh escaping her lips. "Ha ha ha! Ah, yes! How exactly are you related to the Dudley family?" Sword rests a hand on his chin, thinking. "How am I related? Aside from the fact that both our families are nobles?" Sharon blinks, utterly lost. "Related?" Sword's expression suddenly shifts, a spark of realization hitting him. "Ah, that reminds me. There once were talks about an engagement with a lady from that family who is close to..." The word fiancé hangs in the air, turning the old engagement talk into a very real threat. Sword tries to shrug it off, insisting it was long ago. It doesn't matter now, and it won't affect today's mission. But Lost isn't about to let him escape that easily. A wicked grin spreads across the boy's face as he hooks an arm around Sword. "Dad," he chirps, eyes gleaming with mischief, "does that mean you might still get engaged to another noble lady?" Sword's polite smile cracks. "Well, that's possible, I guess," he mutters. Instantly, Lost grabs him, and the whispers begin to swarm. Drinking Witch cackles at Sharon's expense. "Too bad, Miss Sharon," she sings out, while Lost drops a mock ding and offers Sword his deepest condolences. Demon Sword snaps at Sword to say something, but the man just sits there, completely stunned. Lost keeps the engagement joke rolling, cheerfully calling Sword Dad, and trying to pitch him to Sharon as the perfect father figure who deserves her beautiful, noble hair. Sharon opens her mouth to protest, but only a shaky, breathless "I" escapes. Birth offers a gentle smile. "Since we used to be slaves," he starts, but Lost cuts him off with a bitter, cutting question. "We're good at giving up on our dreams, right?" Drinking Witch falls dead silent between them, and Moon's face tightens as the words strike entirely too close to home. Then, the heavy mood shatters. The memory shifts to the open shore. Moon sprints ahead, her voice carrying over the wind. "Hey, I can already see the sea!" Sword looks out over the crashing waves, a soft, deeply relieved smile finally breaking across his face. Sharon cuts him off with a sharp, defensive denial. "As I said, you're wrong. I'm not dumb enough to fall in love with a noble." She trails off with a hesitant, "Also," but the memory violently pulls her back. It drags her to a time when she and Sword were just children, first him pulling her close, then kneeling quietly beside her in the dirt. The adult Sword answers her hesitation with another quiet, tense, "Also," his face hardening with unspoken history. Under the wide, open sky, a fragile smile touches Sharon's lips as Sword quietly admits, "I still haven't given up." The words hang in the air, soft but utterly stubborn. The silence between them stretches, heavy and breathless, holding a tension neither of them dares to break. Sharon drifts into a glittering, inescapable memory. The tall, curly-haired man in the ornate collar stands before her, her flowered dress bright under the unforgiving city lights. Back in the present, she curls up tight in bed, her face buried in the sheets as if the dream refuses to let her go. Birth calls out as they finally reach the bustling port town of Suffolk. But before anyone can settle in, Lost clocks the problem at the gate. Dad? This isn't the Dudleys' mansion." Sword immediately keeps them focused. "First, we need to gather information. It's still not certain the Dudley family will go bankrupt and sell their serfs as slaves." Lost fires the question right back at him. "Information? Who are we gonna ask?" Sword doesn't answer. He just stares hard at the mansion, hunting for a lead. Lost snaps at the group for asking about the roof of a nearby house, fiercely reminding them to be respectful when talking to Dad. In the bustle of the port town, Birth presses Sword. "What? Why do you think so, brother? Sword points out that the merchant they saw is clearly successful. Berth clocks the tell immediately. The man had only one golden thread in his handkerchief, a tiny flex only sharp merchants would notice. Sword drives it home. Merchants show off just enough to signal power, but too much only invites envy. Berth lights up because Sword noticed his sword, Lewis, right away. But Sword's old habit from his past life kicks in. He studies people's belongings and weapons, which is how he spots that the nearby roof is cleaned every single day. He points to a busy shop, figuring a merchant with many customers will know plenty. Berth pushes for a tavern instead, arguing that the more information they have, the better. Sword hands him the job. Across the room, lost Needles, Sharon, and she freezes, asking a breathless, "What?" Berth bolts for the tavern, loudly admitting he has no guts, while the others mercilessly tease him for running away. Sword coughs, pulls himself together, and tries to shake off how strangely Sharon has been acting today. He steps into a shop, where the owner immediately welcomes him. Sword greets the man, correctly guessing he's the owner, and notes the man's unruly hair before formally introducing himself. Above them, the shop's name gleams, Lewis Spencer. The shop owner's smile twitches the second he sees Sword's business card before he forces out a smooth, practiced, "Hey." He thanks Sword for visiting, politely refuses to keep such an expensive card, and offers his own in return. Sword accepts it with a quiet, "Thank you," sliding perfectly through the minefield of noble etiquette. A golden business card from a noble is meant to be read and returned as an act of reverence, a status symbol so potent that nobles openly brag about being tired of getting them returned. Sword clocks the owner's flawless etiquette and realizes this man deals with nobles constantly. He will know plenty. The owner calls him a son of Spencer, adding that Lord Edward speaks proudly of him. Sword actually blushes, muttering, "What? My brother? How embarrassing!" Deciding to ease into small talk, Sword begins to pry out what the man knows about the Dudley family. Then, a girl's voice cuts through the room. "Mr. Lewis!" Sword goes dead silent. The tavern intel run quickly collapses into a booze-fueled disaster, forcing Berth to bail first and report what they managed to learn. Sharon returns fidgeting and entirely alone, nervously asking where the others are. Sword cuts straight to the point, demanding to know what they learned about the Dudley family. Sharon hesitates, sweat beading on her forehead, before offering a painfully thin answer. "They're probably in a tough spot," she stammers, quickly adding, "though I'm not sure." Sword's suspicion hits him immediately. He already knows something is wrong. Berth leans into Lewis, the shop owner, and drops the ugly truth. After 10 minutes of friendly talk, he learned the Dudley family is on the edge of bankruptcy. The mansion's atmosphere is tense, and even the servants are quietly smuggling valuables out of the main estate. Sharon asks if Sword got the same information, and he says yes. Sword shuffles through a stack of business cards, confirming the grim reality, while Sharon adds that every other store she visited said the exact same thing. The collapse is real. Sharon nearly panics when she realizes exactly how much Sword has been asking around. She quickly apologizes for only visiting one place and bringing back such vague information. Sword gently tells her it's okay. She did plenty for a noble, and the rumor has already spread to the taverns. Even the commoners know the Dudley crisis is dire. He thanks Sharon and tells her to rest while he handles the rest. Sharon looks at him, and quietly, a chilling thought takes root. He really resembles someone from her past. Sword snaps, "What?" Lost immediately tries to play it off with a stammering, "N, nothing," just as Sharon rushes in late, offering a breathless apology. Berth even offers to dye his hair as a grand apology, only for another voice to instantly call the idea completely useless. Sword rallies the fractured group. He declares they know enough now and points straight toward Dudley's mansion. The others are still half dead from last night's disaster, desperately gulping down snake blood just to sober up. Sword and the others reach the Dudley family estate, marching straight up to the iron gates with the crisis finally looming in front of them. The maids who meet them are visibly shaken, bowing their heads and offering frantic, trembling apologies. But their answer lands like a physical slap. Lord Dudley is absent right now. The maids' excuse that Lord Dudley is absent doesn't buy them a single second. Birth and Demon Sword immediately press the point. One notes that an old man wouldn't be out at this hour, while the other snaps that it's obvious he just doesn't want guests. The maids flinch hard under the relentless pressure. The confrontation nearly boils over before Sword cuts the escalation off with a sharp, commanding, "Stop it!" Sword offers a polite bow at the Dudley gate and leaves the name Lewis Spencer behind like a loaded, unspoken warning. The maid swallows hard, promising to pass the message along, completely unaware of the silent figure watching them from the shadowed balcony above. Sword turns to leave, but the cold, calculating look in his eyes makes one thing perfectly clear: this isn't over. Before Sword can fully walk away, a terrified maid catches his arm. She leans in and whispers, her voice trembling, "Mister, what will happen to us?" The question cuts straight through him. His eye snaps wide with sudden realization, while the other maids at the gate panic and frantically hush each other. The group walks away from the Dudley estate, the heavy iron gate creaking shut behind them with a final, definitive slam. They leave the Dudley estate behind, walking along the seawall as a heavy, suffocating silence settles over the group. Moon softly calls him Mr. Lewis, and Sword answers with a grim, "Yeah, I know." The maids become the next open wound. They probably have nowhere to go, and the servants are already smuggling their own valuables out of the main estate. The thought lands like a hammer in Sword's mind: if he doesn't do something, those maids and the serfs will end up crushed the exact same way he once was. Sword's resolve hardens in a single, violent instant. He refuses to let the maids or the serfs be dragged back into the chains of slavery. Then, the group spots the Dudley mansion in the distance. Thick, black smoke is pouring endlessly from its roof. One of them recognizes it as the very mansion they just visited, while another desperately tries to brush it off as dinner smoke. But the answer comes cold and immediate: no. The black smoke snapping from the Dudley mansion jolts Sword into immediate motion. He launches himself forward, his cape whipping violently behind him, and the others instantly realize they have to follow. The crowd surges after them, shoving through the narrow streets as panicked voices shout for space. But when Sword finally reaches the mansion entrance, he stops dead. The massive doors are slammed shut and brutally barricaded with heavy wooden beams, thick smoke already crawling around the edges. "What is this?" The Dudley mansion is actively burning, and the trapped, muffled voices behind the barricaded doors are screaming for help. Sword charges straight into the blockade. He grabs a heavy beam, rips it loose with raw force, and forces his way toward the entrance. Above the roaring smoke, the name Lord Dudley echoes through the chaotic inferno. High above the flames, Lord Dudley stands in the burning mansion and gives the order like it's already a finalized death sentence: set the entire estate on fire. The blaze roars through the grand hall, voraciously devouring the shelves and balconies as the inferno swallows everything in its path. Lord Dudley's laughter echoes maniacally over the crackling flames. His eyes gleam with twisted resolve as he delivers his final, cruel decree. "I won't let my slaves become someone else's slaves." He chuckles darkly, watching the fire consume his own legacy rather than let it fall into another's hands. The fire is spreading fast, and Sword doesn't have a single second to waste. He barks for Gavin and Leo to grab on. "Got it," one of them shouts back. Then Sword drives his fist straight through the barricade with a brutal, splintering crack. The heavy beams shatter, and the trapped crowd inside erupts in pure relief. The door finally gives way. People spill out into the street, clapping and thanking God, while a frantic girl rushes to check on the survivors and a shaken boy admits he's still feeling tipsy from the chaos. The rescued servants spill out onto the street, sobbing, "We're safe!" But the long-haired girl barely gets a breath before the relief curdles into dread. The maid's Sword was trying to save aren't among them. Her face drains of all color. "Don't tell me," she whispers, her voice trembling. "I don't see those maids." Deep inside the burning mansion, The missing maids are still trapped in the choking smoke and flames, clutching each other in terror as the fire rapidly closes in. Without a second thought, Sword dumps a heavy bucket of water over himself with a brutal splash, soaking every inch of his body before the fire can take him. He launches toward the burning mansion in a dead sprint, and Sharon's face goes rigid with absolute shock. Then she runs after him. Someone catches her just before she reaches the deadly flames. "No, Miss Sharon, you'll catch fire!" Sharon thrashes violently against the grip, screaming at the top of her lungs. "Let me go! Let me go!" Sharon chokes out a breathless, "Ah!" as Sword runs straight back into the heart of the burning Dudley mansion. The realization hits her like a physical blow. Mr. Lewis really does look just like him. The memory violently cuts to a chained, curly-haired man shielding children, taking the danger for them without a single moment of hesitation. Someone who puts others ahead of himself, no matter the risk. And now, Sword is doing the exact same thing, plunging into the inferno with that unfinished truth hanging heavy in the air. That's why Sharon's face utterly crumples. "No," she whimpers, as the mansion burns uncontrollably in front of her. She violently breaks free and sprints after Sword, screaming into the thick smoke that she doesn't want to be left alone again. But Sword keeps running ahead, his breath ragged, plunging deeper and deeper into the fire. Sword freezes. He finally sees them. The maids are completely surrounded by a ring of fire, trapped with absolutely no escape. One of them, shaking violently and crying, reaches a desperate hand out to him, begging him to hurry and leave this cursed place before it's too late. Sword's eyes go fiercely resolute. Even if it's only them, he lunges for the trapped maids, and a blinding flash of power tears through the choking smoke. He grabs them tight, absolutely refusing to let this end the same tragic way it did before. That's right. This time is different. This time, I have power. The words tear out of Sword's throat as a brutal, resonant clash cuts through the smoke. He throws himself directly through the raging fire, his coat flaring out like a protective shield around the trapped maids. He carries them out, his own body taking the brunt of the searing heat. The flames clawed his skin, but he keeps moving forward. No hesitation, no helplessness, just raw, unstoppable force and one singular thought. This time, he can save them. Sword's blade violently blooms into the ice flower blade. Instantly, the choking smoke freezes around him, erupting into a spiraling storm of biting ice and snow. Sharp snowflakes whip around his face as water droplets flash into frozen beads, clinking and rolling across the stone floor. Sword's ice swallows the entire burning hall whole. Massive icicles spear down from the broken ceiling, thick frost rapidly crawls across the walls, and the raging flames are smothered into absolute silence. In the dead center of that frozen ruin, the maids cling tightly around the little girl, alive, shaking, and miraculously surrounded by pristine snow instead of fire. Outside the Dudley mansion, the crowd can barely process what they are seeing. The fire that was devouring the building is simply gone, leaving only thin smoke and stunned, disbelieving whispers. What happened? Did the fire just disappear? Sharon stands completely frozen, the overwhelming realization catching in her throat. Inside the ice-covered hall, the maids are alive, clinging together with the little girl as pure relief finally breaks through the terror. "I'm so glad!" one of them sobs. The child looks up toward Sword and quietly asks if Mr. Lewis was the one who did this. Sword exhales hard, but Sword stands in the frozen ruin with a tired, gentle smile, the last glowing embers of ice and smoke fading around him like a man who just walked out of a nightmare with everyone still breathing. The little girl stares up at him, wide-eyed and trembling, the only answer she can form, landing far too big for her to hold. Our savior? The final note lands perfectly on the series' ultimate promise. The former slave, reborn as the strongest noble, will stop at nothing to become the absolute strongest in the